Chapter 561. Hong Zhan spun as he flew out, covered in dust and dirt. His body was already stained with blood as he spat out a mouthful of blood. He staggered a few times before he finally steadied his saber. Lifting his head, he stared at the scene with widened eyes that were filled with disbelief. Venerable Lord Ice was nowhere to be seen. Of his 4 subordinates, the 2 with the weaker cultivation base had turned into ashes in the explosion just now, not even their bones were left. The other 2 had been flung out like gunny sacks and were moaning on the ground, severely injured and in a precarious state. Hong Zhan felt like he was dreaming. He could not help rubbing his temples and mumbling, this, what the F***ck is going on? The leader of the Hall of Crimson Blade felt like he was going crazy, his mind a muddled mess. In his entire life, he had never encountered such a bizarre and inconceivable thing. Was this Venerable Lord Ice crazy? You provoked us without any reason and killed one of us without any explanation. Forget it, at most, the 4 Seasons Tower is used to being domineering, but with your great reputation, how is it possible that you can't even withstand a single strike from my saber? I've chopped off your arm right away. If that was all, it could be said that the rumors were wrong. Venerable Lord Ice's reputation was not worthy of it. He had the reputation but no ability. However, you self-destructed without hesitation afterward. What was going on? Did you rush here to die, or did you want to perish together with the enemy because you were unwilling to be humiliated? Isn't this too much? And then, you're clearly throwing your life away and fighting with your life on the line. Why do you still ask others to send you a message and ask your brothers to help you take revenge? Hong Zhan felt as if his brain had turned to mush. He could not think at all. What did you mean by this? Seeing that it was a foregone conclusion, he turned his head in disbelief to look at Yun Yang, only to see Tiantang's young master Yun holding a crystalline object in his hand and stuffing it into his robe. At the same time, he said with a pained expression, Venerable Lord Ice, have a safe journey. Don't worry, I'll definitely bring your words to you. Your last wish, I will fulfill it for you. Yin Yang will never let down our friendship. Hong Zhan, I say. Young Master Yun. Hong Zhan only managed to say one sentence before he heard 2 painful moans coming from both sides. It was his 2 subordinates who had just regained consciousness. The injuries they had suffered were not light. Their entire bodies were like bloody gourds. If they were not treated in time, these 2 lives would most likely be lost. At this moment, Hong Zhan decided that it was better to take care of the living first. With this thought in mind, Hong Zhan immediately flew over and helped the 2 of them up. He hastily examined their injuries and took out some medicine for them to consume. After a long while, they finally stabilized their injuries. However, when they turned their heads to look, their hearts that had just calmed down became tense again. Their entire bodies stiffened in place. Where was Yun Yang? Where did this guy go? Wherever his gaze passed, the spot where young Master Yun stood quietly was no longer the graceful figure in the fluttering purple robe. Hong Zhan let out a long howl, Sir Yun? Yun Yang? Soon after, he soared into the sky, rising several dozen feet into the sky. Looking around, he saw a purple-clothed figure flashing in the distance amidst the snowstorm. Soon after, he completely disappeared. Why did he leave just like that? Shouldn't you talk to him? And express your opinion on this matter? You can discuss your future standpoints as well. What do you mean by slipping away just like that? The people I met today. Hong Zhan was, of course, a veteran of the martial world and one whose experience in the martial world had reached an extremely profound and thorough level. Now, however, he felt that he was completely befuddled today. He was completely unable to understand what sort of people and things he had encountered today, and he didn't even know why all of this had happened, nor did he know the cause of all of this. They had come, quarreled, fought, killed, and done. Finally, the only thing left was the monk scratching his head in confusion. He felt like he was in a dream, stumbling around in the clouds. Who can tell me, what is going on? How did things turn out like this? Looking at the snowstorm, Hong Zhan mumbled to himself in utter bewilderment. I don't know if this young Master Yun is a friend or foe, but he's a sworn enemy of the Four Seasons Tower. Hong Zhan felt wronged. I've never thought of being the Four Seasons Tower's enemy in my entire life. Yin Yang galloped in the snowstorm. With a long howl, Reddy galloped over from afar like a bolt of red lightning. It sprinted to Yun Yang's side, shaking its head and wagging its tail happily, rubbing its head against Yun Yang's body. Yun Yang mounted the horse. The Nine Heavens dictum in his embrace kept sending messages. There was nothing in the east, nothing in the west, and nothing in the north. Yu Rulan had disappeared just like that. Yin Yang's mind was in a whirl. Yun Zuiyu had disappeared after learning about Supreme Flame's death. She had vanished completely. Yu Rulan had disappeared as well after learning about Supreme Wind's death. I know it's a little selfish of me to say this. Yin Yang murmured to himself, but, have you all never considered how much of a blow it would be to me if you all disappeared and died just like that? Has no one ever thought about me, not even in any way? Yin Yang heaved a long sigh. He asked himself honestly. All his life, especially towards his friends, sisters, and brothers, he had always considered things from their perspective. However, no one put themselves in her shoes and thought for her when it happened around her. To put it cruelly, even if you really can't live anymore, even if you really have nothing left to live for, even if living is just torture, you should at least tell me, shouldn't you? I can't stop you all from seeking death, but I can at least arrange a funeral for you. Then, at least I would have seen the corpse. Look at this now. Yin Yang was unusually frustrated. I can't see the person, dead or alive. All that's left is my heart filled with sorrow and regret and endless unsolved mysteries. Looking at the majestic silhouette of Tiantang City from afar, Yin Yang stopped in his tracks. Tiantang City was right in front of him. This was the wilderness, where snow fluttered in the air. The inside and outside of the city were two different worlds. As long as he went in, this would not be the only thing he would be busy with. However, he could not go in. If so, what should he do then? Subconsciously, Yin Yang scanned his surroundings. His mind was suddenly clear amidst the snowstorm. It was as if he had understood something at this very moment. He howled towards the sky and said loudly, "This ends here. This ends here." He clamped his legs together. Reddy let out a long hiss and sped into Tiantang City like a bolt of red lightning. At the same time, the guards at the city gate felt a sudden chill, and their bodies shivered. Their brains were frozen to the point that they could not think. Yin Yang's silhouette was already far away and could no longer be seen. A few of the guards finally snapped back to reality and murmured, "Why is it so cold when young Master Yun is here?" Yin Yang did not feel cold. However, he felt that the piece of ice god's bone in his embrace was pressed against his skin, giving him an incomparably strange feeling. This is the only chapter for today. I haven't decided if I should use this piece of ice god's bone. If I use it, I have endless plots to write. If I don't use it, it's the same. Chapter 562. An icy air that seeped into the marrow slowly spread from the piece of ice god's bone. It burrowed into his body. Yin Yang had wanted to stop the icy air. From the beginning, he had never planned to use the ice god's bone himself. After all, there was only one piece. Besides, he did not know if the Four Seasons Tower had any other secret methods to detect it. It was not safe, and it was incomplete. However, ever since he had placed the ice god's bone in his bosom, this cold energy was clearly different from before. It carried a faint but powerful energy, and it was like 100 rivers converging into the sea, continuously surging into his body. He could not even block it. His body was like a bottomless pit. Yin Yang cultivated the endless divine art, trying his best to cut off the icy air. However, something unexpected happened. When the endless divine art was activated, it was as if the dam of a river had been broken. The icy air surged into his body with a loud boom. Oh! Yin Yang shuddered. Abruptly, he blurted out, "Emmy?" Other than Emmy, there would be no one else who could do such a thing. His hand was already gripping the ice god's bone in his embrace, ready to toss it out if he could not cut it off. However, he changed his mind at this moment. He allowed the howling icy air to rush into his meridians and disappeared without a trace as expected. It did not take long, only a breath's time before the icy air stopped abruptly. It was as if Emmy had stopped absorbing. Yin-Yang looked at the ice god's bone in his hand nervously. He could clearly feel that the extreme chill had faded a lot. Fortunately, the ice god's bone still maintained its original shape and feeling. Luck. Yin-Yang deeply felt that his teachings to Emmy in the past had paid off. You could absorb everything that was given to you, but it was best not to touch anything that was not given to you. Even if you wanted to, you could only move half of it. Now, it seemed that Emmy had strictly followed this rule, only absorbing half of it. However, the half that Emmy has absorbed is definitely the most essential half. Yin-Yang chuckled bitterly. The rest, perhaps it's not because it's following the rules, but because Emmy doesn't really want to absorb it anymore. It had to be said that Yin-Yang's guess was 90% accurate, based on his understanding of Emmy. Emmy? Emmy? Yin-Yang called out a few times, but there was still no response from his deific consciousness. I can't reach him, Yin-Yang sighed. Riding on the crimson horse, he headed towards the Yun mansion. However, he had only traveled 7 to 8 feet when his body suddenly trembled. He thought of something. Although he had lost contact with his deific consciousness space, it seemed like Emmy could still absorb energy from the outside world. The bone of the ice god just now was obviously because of the huge amount of energy within it, so he could sense it. But, if that was the case, then those mysterious crystals that didn't have much energy. Mysterious stones? Wouldn't that work too? If that was the case, the karmic energy of injustice that he had killed during this period of time was also not wasted? The only difference was that he was well aware of it before, but he didn't notice it now. That was all. However, whether it was Emmy, the space, or himself, they all still existed. Understanding this in an instant, the matter that had worried Yin-Yang for a long time was resolved at once. He felt a sense of relief in his heart. Since Emmy was fine, the space was fine, and he was fine, then, the two whiteys in the space would definitely be fine as well. Do what you have to do. Yin-Yang said quietly, I can't stop just because I can't see the results. Stay true to your heart, and everything will be rewarded. He laughed heartily and swaggered off. Venerable Lord Sword, Venerable Lord Snow, and Venerable Lord Frost were burning with anxiety. They had just received the news that Venerable Lord Ice was besieged by the concourse of the underworld. The three of them were already on tenterhooks, rushing over there with all their might. However, before they arrived, they received news that Venerable Lord Ice had been safely rescued by the tower's experts. Just as they felt relieved, they heard that Venerable Lord Ice had actually lost his mind and killed the person who had rescued him before disappearing without a trace. Sword, Snow, and Frost were even more anxious now. They couldn't make heads or tails of it. How could someone like Venerable Lord Ice suddenly lose his mind? This shouldn't be the case. However, when they asked further, they received no reply. Once we find the ice, everything will come to light. The three of them shared the same thought, immediately sending out orders to the martial world to inquire. It was only after a few days that they received news that Venerable Lord Ice seemed to have gone to Enchanting City. Thinking of how Ice's son's family had been destroyed because of the Four Seasons Tower, the three of them understood Venerable Lord Ice's feelings very well, rushing towards Enchanting City in unison. Amidst the snowstorm, the three of them checked into the tower to heaven in the moment they entered Enchanting City. This was the secret rendezvous point that had been set up after the last time. As for the secret rendezvous code, only the brothers themselves knew it. If Venerable Lord Ice had come to Enchanting City, he would definitely have left a message here. Just as they settled in, Venerable Lord Frost went out to check impatiently. He returned in an instant. How was it? Venerable Lord Sword was the most impatient. Ice did leave a message, but I didn't understand it. Venerable Lord Frost's expression was grim as he said, "Take a look for yourselves." I copied it. If you two don't believe me, you can take a look yourself. It's just over there anyway. Venerable Lord Sword and Venerable Lord Snow looked at each other. What was this? Since when did they have to speak with such a suspicious tone between their brothers? Venerable Lord Snow received it and his jaw dropped after a glance. He lifted his head abruptly to look at Venerable Lord Frost. Venerable Lord Frost's expression was cold and bitter, his expression dark as he grinned like he was about to cry and laugh. Just like this. Venerable Lord Sword had seen it as well. His thick brows knitted together as he could not help asking, "Is this really left by ice?" Venerable Lord Frost's expression darkened as he stood up abruptly. "I knew you would ask this. Follow me." Venerable Lord Sword knew that his words were inappropriate and wanted to explain, but Venerable Lord Frost had already strode out without turning back. Both of them could only follow. Coming to the hidden corner of the wall, the three brothers looked at each other in bewilderment as they read the message sent by the jade-like ice. Freezing water into ice and turning ice into jade, that was Venerable Lord Ice's signature skill. In this world, only Venerable Lord Ice alone could do this. Other than that, even Nian leader, Ling Xiaozue, De Guchou, and the rest, whose cultivation base was much higher than Venerable Lord Ice's, would not be able to leave a message with an ice jade like this. Once they saw it, they could immediately confirm that it was indeed left by Venerable Lord Ice. In addition, it had been left behind when there was nothing to worry about. But how is this possible? Venerable Lord Sword exclaimed, feeling a little lost for a moment. Nothing is impossible. Venerable Lord Frost's expression was grim. His pale face was now shrouded in a layer of black. He gritted his teeth and said, "From what I see, not only is this possible, I'm afraid this is the truth." Venerable Lord Snow sucked in a deep breath and said, "I think so too." The three of them stood in the snowstorm as the snow continued to fall. It did not take long before the three of them turned into snowmen at the same time, stiff and motionless. The impact of this incident was earth-shattering to the three of them. It was as if the entire world had crumbled at this moment. The so-called Venerable Lord is only a chess piece. Once he dies, his god's bones are retrieved to be used by someone else. Even if he doesn't die, once his god's bones mature and absorb the air of vitality, only death awaits him. Everything that Venerable Lord Ice had encountered was written clearly on it. Everything that Venerable Lord Ice knew was added as well. However, the trio felt chills run down their spines when they read it, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Chapter 563. The sword light flashed in the snowstorm. The message left behind by Venerable Lord Ice had disappeared. "Go back." Venerable Lord Sword's voice was dry. "Let's talk in the room." Venerable Lord Snow and Venerable Lord Frost were startled awake. Their hearts were filled with bitterness. Of course, it was necessary to return to the room for a discussion. However, just now, the three of them had stood stiffly for a full quarter of an hour, and it was still impossible to hide it from the eyes and ears of others. How much of the god's bone that Bing mentioned is true? Venerable Lord Sword frowned and asked. Venerable Lord Snow sighed and said, "I'm afraid, 10%. 10. Venerable Lord Sword turned around abruptly and looked at Venerable Lord Snow's face. "Yes." Venerable Lord Frost nodded. "Why?" Venerable Lord Sword's cultivation base was strong, but his heart was not as sharp as Venerable Lord Snow and Venerable Lord Frost. Generally speaking, among the five of them, Snow was the leader, followed by Ice and Frost. As for Saber and Sword, they did not have their own opinions and only knew how to charge and attack. "I've been suspicious for so many years." Venerable Lord Snow frowned and said, "Where did the Four Seasons Tower's previous Venerable Lords go? There should be quite a number of Venerables before the five of us. Perhaps they're like us, all swords, blades, snow, frost, and ice. But there might be others." Venerable Lord Sword said, So many years have passed, they must be dead. If they don't die, how can we rise to the top? Do you really need to ask about this? Of course I know they're all dead. Even if he wasn't killed, he would have died of old age. Venerable Lord Snow spoke slowly, word by word. What I'm asking is, even if they're dead, where did the gods' bones go? Venerable Lord Sword's jaw dropped. We all know that God's bones belong to the Four Seasons Tower in the end, and our ultimate goal is to collect all of them. You will be able to achieve an immortal and indestructible divine body. Venerable Lord Snow said slowly, logically speaking, since we have become the new Venerable Lords, the gods' bones obtained by the previous seniors should be given to us to use, right? After all, one piece of God's bone was enough to make us who we are now. What about 3 pieces? What about 10 yuan? How about $20? As he spoke, Venerable Lord Sword and Venerable Lord Frost's expressions grew uglier. But the truth is that they didn't give it to us. So, why not? In other words, since the godly bones weren't given to us, who were they given to? Venerable Lord Snow's voice was getting softer and softer. The expression on his face was getting more and more uncertain. Based on Boss's great talent and bold vision, how could he have allowed such a treasure to be sealed there? There's one more thing. Even if we're lucky enough to obtain all the remaining godly bones, the godly bones we obtain will definitely not be complete. Why is that? Venerable Lord Frost exhaled and said in a low, eerie voice, I was thinking about this as well. Venerable Lord Sword's hands and feet were already cold. He stood there in a daze. His eyes were dull, and he seemed to have lost his spirit. After a long time, he suddenly coughed, his voice extremely muffled. A mouthful of viscous blood suddenly flowed from his mouth. But he still stood there blankly, as if he didn't realize that he had just vomited a mouthful of blood. His spirit, chi, and spirit had completely collapsed. He had been loyal to the Four Seasons Tower all his life, fighting in the martial world and risking his life hundreds and thousands of times. He had never doubted anything. However, today, in a short period of time, his lifelong pursuit and belief had completely collapsed. To Venerable Lord Sword, it was like the sky had collapsed. Sword. Venerable Lord Snow called out worriedly. Venerable Lord Sword turned his head like a puppet and said numbly, What? As soon as he uttered the word, he spat out another mouthful of blood. His complexion had turned a deathly shade of gray. At this moment, he actually had the will to die. He knew that his current emotional state had caused his cultivation method to collapse, his meridians to be disrupted, and his mystical chi to backfire. However, he allowed the collapsing mystical chi to run amok in his body without any restraint. His eyes had already turned into 2 black holes. They were like the eye sockets of a skeleton that had been buried in the ground for decades. Boom! Venerable Lord Frost sent Venerable Lord Sword flying with a slap. Endless frost fell on Venerable Lord Sword with a loud bang. He pounced on Venerable Lord Sword and choked his neck, roaring with tears in his eyes. What do you want to do? Do you want to die? Who among us brothers doesn't want to die? However, can you die just because you want to? Seeking death in front of your own brothers, who do you think you are? Venerable Lord Sword's throat was being choked, but he was finally clear-headed. His eyes blinked and regained their clarity. He grabbed Venerable Lord Frost's hand and murmured, That's right, I can't die yet. He sat cross-legged on the ground, cultivating and combing through his meridians. Although his will to die had been dispelled, his expression was still filled with exhaustion. What do we do now? Venerable Lord Frost asked. The only thing we can do now is to find Bing. Venerable Lord Snow's gaze flickered dangerously. Only when we brothers are together can we discuss our future path. Otherwise, even if the 3 of us come up with an elaborate plan, it would be useless if Bing doesn't know about it. Venerable Lord Snow said faintly, We are brothers. We live and die together. We die together. If we fight together. However, if we're truly disheartened and wish to quit the martial world, then we have to leave together. Venerable Lord Frost said loudly, That's right. We live and die together, we fight and retreat together. His eyes met with Venerable Lord Snow's, reading each other's thoughts. Venerable Lord Snow had mentioned earlier that even if they were to quit the martial world, they had to do it together. They had been brothers for so many years. How could Venerable Lord Frost not know that Venerable Lord Snow had already thought of quitting the martial world when he said so? He had even decided to quit. Venerable Lord Sword was recuperating while Snow and Frost were guarding him. Quietly, the two brothers did not say a word, not even a word. What was in front of them was already enough. Vengeance was out of the question, but to continue, he was unwilling to do so no matter what. There was only one way left. Quit. However, if they did so, they would definitely face the Four Seasons Tower's endless pursuit. How could they really quit? The world is vast, the martial world is vast, but where can there be peace? After a long while, Venerable Lord Snow murmured in a daze. His words seemed to have touched Venerable Lord Frost's heart. He could not help feeling a lump in his throat, tears almost falling. Before today, who would have thought that they would be faced with such a situation? Suddenly, at this moment, dong, 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 someone knocked on the door. Venerable Lord Snow and Venerable Lord Frost stood up abruptly as if they had been struck by lightning. Exchanging glances, they could feel the paleness of each other's faces and the indescribable panic in their gazes. Venerable Lord Snow sucked in a deep breath, trying his best to keep his voice calm. Who is it? Outside, a clear voice rang out. Are the seniors Snow and Frost inside? I'm Yun Yang, here to pay a visit. Yun Yang? Young Master Yun? Both of them were surprised. Young Master Yun's shadow seemed to be involved in some of the things that had happened when they came to the capital. Later on, Lei Dongtian's incident had involved Yun Yang as well. They had guarded the valley to intercept the pursuers, and it had been Yun Yang who had charged out. Now, when they were waiting for such a moment and in such a situation, young Master Yun had actually appeared again. What was he doing here? Venerable Lord Frost snorted coldly and said, so it's young Master Yun. However, we don't seem to have such a relationship with young Master Yun for a visit. I wonder what is young Master Yun's purpose for coming here this time. The Venerable Lords did not want to see anyone with their current mood. Their bad mood was already at its peak. What more Yun Yang, who had once been their enemy? He was someone who could not help but strike when he saw him. Outside, Yun Yang's voice spoke elegantly. Of course our friendship isn't enough, but there are things that don't require friendship. I'm here to pay a visit at someone's request. If Venerable Lord isn't willing to meet me, then it's fine for me to return. Someone's request? Venerable Lord Frost's eyes glinted as he opened the door. Who asked you to come? Yun Yang was dressed in purple, standing elegantly outside the door. He said with a smile, let's talk about this after we enter. Of course, if Venerable Lord Frost wants me to say it at the door, it's fine as well. Inside, Venerable Lord Snow's voice rang out, since young Master Yun is here, you're a guest. Please come in and have some tea. Venerable Lord Frost opened the door and said, come in. Yun Yang smiled faintly and walked in elegantly. Venerable Lord Snow sat and looked at Yun Yang with a sharp gaze. Young Master Yun, I wonder who asked you to come? Yun Yang answered, him. With a flick of his wrist, a white bone that looked like jade appeared in his palm. The temperature in the room dropped by dozens of degrees abruptly. It was freezing cold. Second update. Chapter 564. Looking at the crystal-clear bone that resembled jade, Venerable Lord Sword, Snow, and Frost were shocked. It was as if they had been struck by lightning. All three pairs of eyes turned round at the same time. Venerable Lord Sword, who was meditating, widened his eyes as he spat out a mouthful of blood like an arrow, his face flushed red. Even Venerable Lord Snow's lips were trembling, his face turning as white as snow. He lived up to his name. Venerable Lord Frost shuddered as well. He froze on the spot, unmoving like a zombie. It was a very small piece of bone, it could even be said to be extremely short. If it were to be placed on a person's body, it would probably be a section of the human spine. Yin Yang looked at the ice god's bone in his hand, his expression filled with reluctance as if he was reluctant to hand it over. However, he still extended his hand and placed the ice god's bone on the table with a soft thud. The sound was extremely soft, but it pulled the trio back to their senses immediately. Their gazes focused on the ice bone on the table. This is what Venerable Lord Ice entrusted to me before he died. Yin Yang took a deep breath and said, "To be honest, I actually don't want to help. But, as a fellow cultivator, I can't bear to refuse the final request of a powerhouse of the present age before his death." The three of them didn't say anything. They just stared blankly at the bone, staring at it without blinking. Before Venerable Lord Ice died, he had 2.5 requests. Yin Yang said, one of them is to send the bone of the ice god back, especially when he specified that the bone of the ice god should be entrusted to his brothers and not to the Four Seasons Tower. This is also one of the main reasons why I'm willing to fulfill his request. Even though the Four Seasons Tower's four venerable lords had previously promised not to be Yun Yang's enemy due to fate, the Four Seasons Tower's stance had always been against Yutong. This was something everyone was well aware of. The four venerable lords also knew that Yun Yang was someone who valued brotherhood. With Yun Yang's current cultivation base and knowledge as a Heaven Realm cultivator, even if he did not know the origin of the god's bone, he knew that it was not an ordinary item. It was of great help to one's cultivation. His willingness to return it was a great favor. The three venerable ones trembled at the same time. Their eyes were filled with tears, and they were extremely sad. "The other request is for me to tell his brothers to avenge him," Yin Yang said. Venerable Lord Sword panted violently, his throat producing a noise that sounded like he was pulling a windmill, extremely piercing to the ears. "Who killed him? Who is it?" Venerable Lord Snow's tone was devoid of his usual coldness. Both of his hands were trembling so much that he could barely clench his fists. He reached out with great effort to grab the bone of the ice god, feeling the icy aura firsthand. Tears finally flowed from his eyes like spring water. Venerable Lord Frost's frosty aura soared into the sky as he turned his head abruptly. "Who killed my brother? Are you from the concourse of the underworld?" This was almost the most direct judgment of the three venerable lords. The four venerable lords were renowned, but there were few who possessed such capabilities in this world. Even if they had such capabilities, most of them would be wary of the Four Seasons Tower's vengeance and would not actually kill them. Only the concourse of the underworld had completely fallen out with the Four Seasons Tower. They would not rest until one of them was dead. Many of them had joined forces to attack Venerable Lord Ice, injuring him severely. It was reasonable that they would pursue and kill him. Yin Yang said, although this person was also a renowned assassin in the martial world, he wasn't from the concourse of the underworld. That person was Hong Zhan from the Hall of Crimson Blade. Hong Zhan. Venerable Lord Snow let out a shrill roar. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Venerable Lord Sword stared straight at Yun Yang. "You had a total of 2.5 requests just now. My brother, what was the half request?" Yin Yang said, This is a shame." Venerable Lord Ice had only left behind a sentence that came out of the blue. It was, to let my brothers read my message first and then make a decision carefully. It's just a random sentence. I don't know if Venerable Lord Ice didn't finish his sentence before he died, or if that's the case. That's why this third request is only this. That's why I said it's half a request, Yun Yang pondered. This sentence was added by Yun Yang himself, but deep in his bones, Yun Yang believed that it was impossible that Venerable Lord Ice would not pass the relevant message to them, based on their brotherly bond. However, Yun Yang was afraid that they would be in a state of panic now. What if they did not see the relevant message? Therefore, he had specifically reminded them here, using it as an opportunity. As soon as he said that, the three venerable ones looked at each other, then at each other. Their eyes seemed to be in deep thought. Hong Zhan. Hong Zhan. Hong Zhan. Venerable Lord Frost lowered his head, murmuring. The resentment in his murmurs could not be washed away even with all the water in the river. Venerable Lord Snow gripped the bone of ice god tightly, tears falling from his eyes like pearls from a broken necklace. Raising his head, he murmured, "The 5 of us brothers have roamed the world for decades, spending more time together than apart. We've almost never been separated. Who would have thought that Saber God would perish some time ago?" The brothers were heartbroken. Who would have thought that one more would be gone today? He closed his eyes and 2 streams of tears flowed down his cheeks. At this moment, wrinkles visibly appeared on his originally smooth face. The hair on his head that was originally half black and half white had turned snow white almost in the blink of an eye. There was not a single strand of hair that was tainted. His hair had turned white in an instant. Seeing Venerable Lord Snow's senile appearance, Venerable Lord Sword and Venerable Lord Frost turned pale with fright. "Snow!" both of them exclaimed in unison. Venerable Lord Snow turned a deaf ear, but his demeanor was even older and more dispirited. He took a deep breath and sighed deeply. His tears never stopped, and there was a sense of disheartened exuding from him without any concealment. Venerable Lord Frost and Venerable Lord Sword looked at Venerable Lord Snow in a daze, suddenly realizing that Venerable Lord Snow cared so much about the truth of God's bone. The impact of this incident on him was unusually heavy. Perhaps, it could be said that Venerable Lord Ice's death had greatly hurt Venerable Lord Snow while the truth of God's bone had become a reality, turning him into a hopeless despair. With these 2 things stacked on top of each other, Venerable Lord Ice's life creed had completely collapsed, just like Venerable Lord Sword's. An outsider would not be able to feel such pain unless they had experienced it personally. Yin Yang looked at them indifferently, unmoved from the beginning to the end. He had never been a cold-blooded person, but looking at the inexplicable pain of Venerable Lord Snow and the others, Yin Yang was only elated. "Have you finally tasted what it feels like to see your dearest brother die? How is it? Does it feel good? Does it feel good? Have you finally experienced what it feels like to have 8 of my brothers perish right beside me at Tianxian Cliff all those years ago? Can't you accept it just because one of you died? What about me? Who can understand my pain?" Chapter 565. The 4 Seasons Tower has wronged all of you, using you in the matter of God's bone. So what if your fate is rough and bleak? Back then, 8 of my brothers died. Among the murderers, the people we protected with all our hearts were betrayed and contributed to the process. Can you all understand how cold my heart is? Now, it's far from enough. There will be more to come. Continue to taste the pain of being helpless and helpless. Young Master Yun. Venerable Lord Snow stood up slowly, his snow-white robes fluttering despite the absence of wind. "Thank you, young Master Yun, for your righteousness and for bringing us the last message of our brothers. However, I still want to ask one more thing. It's not that I'm doubting young Master Yun. I hope young Master Yun won't mind." Yin Yang's expression turned sorrowful at once as he said bitterly, "Please ask, Venerable Lord Snow. Although we've never been on good terms before, we've crossed paths after all. Venerable Lords are true to their words and the past is still fresh in our minds. A good deed is a good deed, and it's only right that it comes to this. Regarding Venerable Lord Ice, I'll tell you everything I know. This is my last respect to a strong man and also an explanation for the past. Thank you, young Master Yun, for your kindness." Venerable Lord Snow said slowly in a low voice. "We want to know, how did Hong Zhan kill our brothers? Was young Master there?" Venerable Lord Sword and Venerable Lord Frost looked over at the same time. "Speaking of which, this is really a coincidence. I happened to be there at the right time and witnessed the incident with my own eyes. Due to some reasons, I had to leave the city to settle some matters." Yin Yang brushed past his own matters vaguely. Yin Yang had caused quite a commotion these few days, almost everyone knew about it. Naturally, the 3 venerable lords knew about it as well, but they were not in the mood to care about what Yin Yang had left the city for. There was only one thing they were concerned about. At the time, I went to a more secluded hill and found that someone was paying respects there. I was surprised by the weather and the situation. When I went over to take a look, I was surprised to find that it was Venerable Lord Ice. Venerable Lord Ice was already severely injured then. Venerable Lord Snow sighed sadly. That should be the cenotaph that Ice had built for his son. When Ice caused the destruction of his family, he didn't even get his son's belongings. Only the gold and silver that his son had given him when he left Tiantang City was left. He buried it there. I even worked with him on this matter. As for serious injuries, Venerable Lord Snow and the other two had a sharp look in their eyes. Venerable Lord Ice had to bear the burden of being hunted down by the concourse of the underworld and the Four Seasons Tower. However, there was no need to mention this to Yun Yang. Back then, Venerable Lord Ice looked very sad. We met by chance and it was difficult to speak of our shallow acquaintances. I was just about to show myself and leave after a few pleasantries, but the leader of the Hall of Crimson Blade, Hong Zhan, came with his 5 subordinates. Yin Yang looked pained. I witnessed the entire battle. It was a pity that my cultivation base was too low. Venerable Lord Frost rolled his eyes. He thought to himself, your cultivation level is considered low? With your current cultivation, even if it's not unprecedented, it's enough for you to look down on your generation. It's just that you'll never help us. If you'd been willing to help Ice sincerely, perhaps Ice wouldn't have fallen in this battle. Despite knowing this, Venerable Lord Snow still said something. Both of them were on opposing sides. Yin Yang's willingness to send a letter after the incident and not devour God's bone was already a great favor. It would be unreasonable to ask for more. Both sides had a disagreement and a fight broke out. In the end, Venerable Lord Ice was severely injured, but he also killed 3 of the other party's men. At the very last moment, Venerable Lord Ice suddenly called out my name. Yin Yang looked confused. I was quite confident in my cultivation base and thought that Venerable Lord Ice didn't know that I was nearby. Although I planned to show myself, I wanted to stay out of it because of the arrival of the people from the Hall of Crimson Blade. Venerable Lord Frost harumphed coldly, forcefully holding back his words. Your cultivation base is impressive, but it's still wishful thinking for you to hide your tracks from us, Snow, Frost, and Ice, in this icy environment. Then, Venerable Lord Ice charged towards me and entrusted me with these matters. Then he turned around and self-destructed, and this, Yun Yang spoke with a confused expression, as if he did not know what it was. Self-destruct, how could it be? Venerable Lord Frost mumbled to himself. Yin Yang still looked puzzled as he said, I'm full of doubts about this as well. Although Venerable Lord Ice was severely injured, he could charge to my side and had the time to entrust those matters to me. There might have been a chance for him to break out of the encirclement, but why didn't he do so? Why did he fight to his death instead? This is really illogical. To put it bluntly, if it weren't for the fact that I always keep my promises, would definitely not have made this trip. Honestly speaking, this matter is full of doubts, but the situation at that time was indeed like that. I have already said everything I have to say. If you still have doubts, then forgive me for being powerless. Venerable Lord Snow and the other 2 heaved a long sigh. As veterans of the martial world, they naturally understood Yun Yang's current thoughts, but they understood Venerable Lord Ice's thoughts even better. Why didn't he escape? Why did he fight to his death? Why? It was truly an inexplicable bitterness and tears of blood. Putting himself in Venerable Lord Ice's shoes, standing before the grave of the son he had killed, he had been deceived to such an extent in this lifetime. He was severely injured and on the brink of death. He could not even return to the Four Seasons Tower that he had always relied on. The world was vast, but there was no place for him to stand. He was really disheartened to the extreme. He really didn't want to live anymore. Is Hong Zhan still alive? Venerable Lord Snow asked coldly. He's probably the only one who's completely intact in that battle. Yin Yang said, among his 5 subordinates, 3 died and 2 were severely injured. Even the 2 who survived are half dead. Forgive me for being frank, but just by looking at the battle, I can only feel that Hong Zhan's cultivation base and combat power are much higher than Venerable Lord Ice's. Perhaps, this is the main reason why Venerable Lord Ice resorted to such an extreme tactic. Venerable Lord Snow gritted his teeth and said, the leader of the Hall of Crimson Blade, of course, his cultivation base is powerful. His reputation is well deserved. His chilling laughter was laced with indescribable venom. Yin Yang, an outsider, could not help but shudder when he heard it. We thank young Master Yun once again for your letter. Venerable Lord Snow stood up and walked to the door, speaking hoarsely, the three of us brothers owe young Master Yun a great favor. If there's a chance in the future, we'll definitely repay you. We won't go back on our words. There was a sense of kindness in his words, but at the same time, he was also asking the guest to leave. Yin Yang stood up in understanding and said, I didn't let you down after all. I should take my leave now. Three venerable lords, please restrain your grief. After all, the deceased has passed away. Venerable Lord Snow waved his hand tiredly, his expression weary. Go, farewell. Yin Yang turned and walked out of the inn. He stood in the hall for a while but did not hear any movement from the room. It was as if there was no living person inside. Yin Yang was silent for a moment before he finally left. He went straight to Yang Butao's and his wife's graves. Yang Butao, the grudge of life with your family has come to an end just like that. Don't worry, your youngest son will be fine. Yin Yang turned and left. On the same night, Tiantang City was suddenly in a state of turmoil. Blood rained everywhere, and everything was dyed red. The three secret bases that the Hall of Crimson Blade had set up in Tiantang City were suddenly ambushed. The three attackers charged in and killed every living thing that could breathe like they were chopping vegetables. They had killed every living thing in sight, even the precious mystical beasts in the base, the dogs that guarded the door, and the chickens and wild cats that were foraging nearby had been decapitated as well. It was truly a massacre that left no one alive. Although this massacre was extreme, it was still considered a Jianghu vendetta. Unfortunately, one of the three secret strongholds, as well as the 8 people who were in charge of this place, had used some unknown means to set up their stronghold in the 4th prince's courtyard. Even though it was the prince's residence, the 3 men were still fearless. They had suddenly appeared in the middle of the night and killed their way in. Everyone in the prince's residence had been killed, including the 300 guards, the army, the butler, and the maids. None of them had survived. Such a shocking massacre had shaken the entire Tiantang city. However, something even more shocking had yet to come. In the second half of the night, after the last Hall of Crimson Blade's base had been forcefully removed by the 3 men, a clear voice rang in Tiantang City's night sky like the roar of a dragon and a tiger. Hong Zhan. Aren't you known to be unfathomable? Why are you acting like a coward now? What right do you have to lead the Hall of Crimson Blade with such behavior? Come out and accept your death. Once the voice rang out, a large group of Yutong experts sprinted in that direction. It was only a moment before the voice rang out again, Hong Zhan. Come out if you're a man. He shouted 3 times in a row, but there was no response from the people around him. When Yutong's experts had rushed to the top floor of Tower to Heaven Inn, where the voice had come from, they could only see more than 40 bloody heads piled up amidst the frost. They were all experts from the Hall of Crimson Blade. Other than the heads, there were also more than 40 blood sabers that had been broken into halves placed neatly on the snowy ground. Chapter 566. The words written in blood revealed a lot of information. This bloody case seemed to have finally revealed its cause and effect. It was actually the 4 Seasons Tower's experts who had clashed with the Hall of Crimson Blade. This was clearly a martial world matter. How did it involve the residence of Prince and even lead to such a bloody case? Even though the truth was revealed now, it still caused an uproar in the capital city. The question was obvious: how could there be so many assassins hidden in the 4th prince's residence? What was the 4th prince trying to do? His Majesty was enraged on the spot, summoning the 4th prince into the palace at once and scolding him harshly. He was ordered to be grounded and chased out of the palace and the residence of Prince. He was not allowed to step out of the residence for the next 3 years. When the fourth prince came out, his face was pale but his gaze was extremely vicious. On the same day, the remaining experts of the Hall of Crimson Blade who were still in Tiantang City seemed to have received some sort of order as they retreated from Tiantang City. Seeing them retreat, sword, snow, and frost did not want to let them go. They followed closely behind them and gave chase. The experts of the residents of Yun were indifferent to the situation while the rest of Tiantang City was powerless against these unparalleled experts. They could only watch helplessly as they came and went. "What should we do?" asked Shui Wuyin telepathically. From Shui Wuyin's point of view, they could not just watch helplessly. Once something like this became a routine, it would form a misconception that top-notch experts could do whatever they wanted in Yutang's capital, Tiantang City, and Yutang was powerless to stop them. Such a situation should not be underestimated. Yin Yang understood the severity of the situation and immediately went underground. In the secret chamber, Yin Yang told King Qingguang, "Our chance is here." King Qingguang perked up. "What chance?" "The situation has changed. The Four Seasons Tower's 3 venerable lords are going against the Hall of Crimson Blade." Yin Yang's gaze was glinting. "The 3 venerable lords are going against the Hall of Crimson Blade in the name of the Four Seasons Tower. In other words, the Hall of Crimson Blade is facing the threat of annihilation, just like the concourse of the underworld." First Court King Qingguang frowned. "What do you mean?" "Regardless of the Hall of Crimson Blade's original intention for coming here, they are currently in a perilous situation. They could become the next concourse of the underworld at any time." Yin Yang said calmly, "At the very least, the Four Seasons Tower's experts within thousands of miles are still under the 3 venerable lords' command. Therefore, at least in the cognition of most people, this is already an inevitable reality. And at this time, I believe that an alliance is necessary." Yin Yang enunciated each word clearly. "Alliance?" King Qingguang was even more confused. "That's right, the alliance." Yin Yang nodded heavily. "Firstly, it can provide us with assistance. Secondly, it can provide us with an opportunity to infiltrate their internal affairs. We urgently need this information now." First Court King Qingguang nodded slowly, his eyes growing brighter. "Actually, I'm looking forward to pulling the Merciless Tower in as well. That would be the best." Yin Yang grinned. "This is a little difficult." First Court King Qingguang said with a frown. After a moment of contemplation, he said, "But it's not impossible." "I'll discuss with my brothers later and see if there's any room for maneuver," said First Court King Qingguang. "Go ahead and try. If it really doesn't work out, I have other ideas here." Yin Yang smiled mysteriously. First Court King Qingguang rolled his eyes. He thought to himself, "We don't even have any ideas. What good ideas can you have?" "How are the injuries of the Yama kings from the other courts recovering?" asked Yin Yang. "It's all thanks to young master's spiritual medicine that most of them are fine now. 7 of my brothers have already recovered 80 to 90% of their combat power. They can handle most of the battles." First Court King Qingguang sighed, "It's just that my master's injury hasn't improved." Yin Yang could only remain silent. This was truly something that he had no solution to at the moment. The higher a person's cultivation base, the harder it was for him to be injured. Even if he was injured, it would be easier for him to recover. However, the more one was like this, the harder it would be to heal once he suffered a serious injury that affected his base and vitality. Usually, it would be an incurable disease. Under the premise that the space had yet to recover and his connection with Emmy had yet to be re-established, the help Yin Yang could give was already the limit. Speaking of medicine, however, Yin Yang thought of Lei Dongtian again. He could not help sighing inwardly. What a good person he was. He gave whatever he wanted. Other than being a little silly, his value was still rather high. Especially when he wanted to use Yin Yang as a cauldron. That was truly wonderful. Why had there been no news of such a good person for so long? Yin Yang could not help but sigh. He missed young Master Lei, who had left and never returned. Speaking of which, young Master Yun's mystical cultivation method is truly remarkable. It can actually slow down my master's condition and even maintain his current condition, not worsening it further. This is already a great fortune amidst the misfortune. Thinking of his master's injury, First Court King Qingguang said with some relief, "As long as he's still here, there's a chance. Let's see if there's another chance in the future, or if we can collect some precious heaven and earth resources and try to see if it works." To be able to confirm that there's no danger to his life now is already far beyond our expectations. First Court King Qingguang left, his face filled with joy. It was obvious that the concourse of the underworld had been in a precarious situation all this while. How could he not be worried? Now that he was suddenly informed that their enemy, the Four Seasons Tower, had gone through a huge change and had even established a strong enmity like the Hall of Crimson Blade, it was truly great news. Furthermore, if the follow-up was successful, it might be possible for the world's top 3 assassin organizations to work together to fight against the Four Seasons Tower. Yin Yang, who watched King Qingguang leave, fell into a state of contemplation. However, his emotions were different from King Qingguang's joy. His brows were tightly furrowed, not at all relieved. Yin Yang carefully calculated the combat strength of both sides and realized that there were quite a number of high-end combat forces on his side. For example, the 10 kings of the Yama underworld, the highest cultivation base among them was already at the 3rd level of Dao realm while the lowest was at the 9th heaven realm. Their combat strength was truly formidable. On the residents of Yun's side, Bai Shue had already reached the 8th heaven realm while Fang Mafei was at the 6th heaven realm. Lao Mei was at the 5th heaven realm. Marquis Yun had also improved by leaps and bounds during this period of time. Although he was slightly inferior to Bai Shue, he was also at the 7th heaven realm. On the contrary, Yun Yang's 4th heaven realm was the weakest among the group. It did not seem right to say that Yun Yang was the weakest. After all, there was still Ji Lingxi, a 1st heaven expert who had just ascended to the heaven realm. With the combined combat strength and the intelligence organization that Shui Wuyin had built, their combined ability was already enough to defeat most of the forces in this world. In spite of this, if they were to fight the Four Seasons Tower head-on, they still had no chance of winning. Even when the Four Seasons Tower's 3 venerable lords had half betrayed them and would no longer be their enemy, they might even be used by the Four Seasons Tower to attack the tower. Their true ability was still hopelessly strong and difficult to fight. After all, the hidden experts of the Four Seasons Tower had never appeared. No one knew how high their battle prowess was. That was the most frightening thing. The unknown had always been an adjective that was difficult to assess. A moment of carelessness could lead to annihilation, never to exist again. Chapter 567. In the past, he only knew of Mr. Nian, 365, and Supreme Lord Springfrost. During the time he fought with Supreme Lord Springfrost was already extremely difficult to deal with and could be considered a top-notch expert. Later on, with the appearance of the 5 venerable lords, he knew that Supreme Lord Springfrost's level was nothing much. The 5 venerable lords were the true experts. Today, however, he knew the reality, or rather, the truth. The so-called 5 venerable lords were merely SOSO, they were merely characters that could be abandoned at any time. Then, what did the Four Seasons Tower's true core force look like? Had they not appeared all this while? Or had they long been living in the secular world with another face? In addition, there was more than one Mr. Nian that Venerable Lord Ice had mentioned. There were many incarnations. Who exactly was he referring to? Every bit of information he knew gave Yin Yang a headache, making it hard for him to sleep. Who was it that created such a monstrous force like the Four Seasons Tower? Yin Yang had to admit that he was rather impressed by the sex concealment method. Since the beginning of time, to be able to develop a sect to such an extent, the Four Seasons Tower was probably the only one. And it just so happened that he had bumped into this family. Each time his ability increased tremendously and he laid out a series of traps to cause the other party to suffer heavy losses, he would always be shocked to realize that the ability displayed by the other party was only the tip of the iceberg when he thought that he could fight them. Even though both parties had long decided that they would fight to the death, when they actually met, it would only be him who would die and the enemy who would not. He might not even be able to cause a certain degree of damage. The disparity in ability between both parties was like heaven and earth. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that he could vaguely sense the other party's strength each time before they actually unleashed their destructive power and evaded their attacks. Otherwise, he would have been long dead. However, how long could such good luck last? Another night had passed. The turbulence that Enchanting City was experiencing had yet to subside. Instead, it was growing more intense. Countless nightwalkers were flying in the sky above Enchanting City. It was still chilly at one moment, but after a while, the ghastly fog filled the air. Murderous intent filled the air and ghostly cries filled the air. The officials in charge of public security in Enchanting City were so worried that their hair had turned white. Why are there so many top-notch experts in Enchanting City all of a sudden? Are there actually so many experts in this world? Faced with such a situation, they could only let it be. There was nothing they could do but let the situation play out as it was. It was never a lie to say that heroes broke the law with their martial arts. Jianghu people with high cultivation rarely paid attention to the so-called laws of the imperial court. They came and went as they pleased. Not only would they kill a few people to relieve their boredom when they were unhappy, but they would also kill a few people to celebrate when they were happy. They were really unreasonable, disregarding justice, disregarding the law, and disregarding reason. As the ancient saying goes, if one learns the arts of literature and martial arts, they will be sold to the royal family. Now it seems like, sigh. It's said that many, many years ago, most martial artists were still proud to be able to be an official. The imperial court's official position was even more attractive to these people. However, no one knows when the forces of the martial world rose and unexpectedly suppressed the power of the secular countries. This caused these people to not only look up to the emperor, but also ignore justice and justice, only knowing how to commit crimes with their martial arts. The current situation is already the result of the great suppression and checks and balances of the emperors of the past. I really don't know when this phenomenon can be completely reversed. An official stood in his own yard, sighing to the sky. Sigh, it's no longer the era where the imperial power is supreme. The reason the martial world experts in the past complied with the imperial court was because they were still greedy for the riches and glory of the mortal realm. However, to these legendary figures, the so-called riches and pleasures of the flesh are no longer attractive to them. Because for them, those are things that are easily obtainable and can be gathered and scattered at any time. The only thing that can tempt them now, or rather, the only thing they care about, is the pride of standing alone at the top of the world, looking down on the world, and even personal longevity and eternal pride. The one who spoke was the official's wife. She held her husband's arm and said gently, "The current situation is no longer something you can solve. It's just that this world is just too big, unless there comes a day when the world is unified once more, and the strongest person in the world uses all sorts of methods to suppress the forces of power in the world of martial artists to a point where they can't even breathe. Only then will they be able to restore order to everyone. Apart from that, the only thing we can do is to watch from the sidelines." The official sighed, feeling speechless for a long time. A gust of ghastly fog appeared out of nowhere and shrouded a secluded yard in an instant. There was no further commotion in the small yard due to the sudden change. It was still silent as if there was no one around. The ghastly fog swirled and a human silhouette quietly materialized. The silhouette spoke eerily, "A good friend has come to visit. I wonder if the person in charge of the Merciless Tower is here?" It turned out that this inconspicuous little yard was the Merciless Tower's base in Enchanting City. In the seemingly empty courtyard, a strange voice suddenly rang out, "So it is the concourse of the underworld's 10 great kings, King Chujiang, who has graced us with his presence. I wonder why King Chujiang has come here this time." King Chujiang smiled faintly and said, "Is Henbieli not here?" The voice in the dark said coldly, "Does King Chujiang think that there's no one else in the Merciless Tower who is qualified to speak to King Chujiang other than our leader?" King Chujiang said, "I don't mean that. It's just that the main reason I've come personally this time is related to the life and death of both our establishments. I have to be cautious." The person in the dark chuckled strangely. "The life and death of both our establishments? King Chujiang, you speak from the heart. The concourse of the underworld is indeed at the end of its rope while the Merciless Tower is at its peak. The line of life and death is as clear as day indeed." King Chujiang snorted and said coldly, "If the Merciless Tower knows this, then there's no need to say anything more. Farewell." A chilly wind blew and the ghastly fog rose immediately. King Chujiang vanished without a trace in the blink of an eye. King Chujiang was not interested in continuing the conversation as his warm welcome was met with a cold backside. They were all superb experts who dominated their respective areas. This bit of face was still important, there was no need for them to harass each other relentlessly. The person in the dark sneered and said, "You're obviously at the end of your rope and have come to ask for help, yet you're still putting on the smelly airs of the world's top assassin school. Your father won't fall for it." A few bootlicking voices came from the dark. "Vice leader is domineering indeed. We've suffered at the hands of the concourse of the underworld for so long. Today, we can finally hold our heads up high. We're going to sit back and watch them fall. Only the Merciless Tower is at its peak and will never fade." That's right, that's right. King Chujiang has always been arrogant and has never taken anyone seriously. Now that he's been rebuked by the vice leader, he doesn't dare to do or say anything. How delightful. "Vice leader, you've made us brothers proud." The vice leader snorted. When everyone was almost done with their bootlicking, he said, "Stop the bootlicking. I won't fall for it. Quickly, hide yourselves and wait for the leader's orders." "Yes." Unexpectedly, before he could finish his words, a bright sword light appeared out of nowhere. An indescribable killing intent enveloped the entire courtyard in an instant. It was also at this moment that the long swords on the waists of the Merciless Tower's assassins clanged at the same time. A voice that was as cold as a sword said, "Wait for your leader's orders? Hee hee, I'm afraid you won't be able to wait for it in this lifetime." Chapter 568. When Sword Deity moved, thousands of swords trembled in fear. This was a unique aura that belonged solely to Venerable Lord Sword. He was the only one, no other. As the strange phenomenon appeared, a chilling laugh followed. All assassin schools should not exist in the martial world. Before the voice could echo in the air, sword light lit up the night sky. Cries of agony could be heard from the few spots where the sword chimes had been heard earlier as blood sprayed into the sky. The night was filled with the stench of blood. Venerable Lord Sword. A lean silhouette pounced out like lightning, the long whip in his hand dancing swiftly in the air like a snake. At the same time, he asked in a low voice, "Why have you come here?" Venerable Lord Sword snorted coldly. "I find the Merciless Tower an eyesore." "Is this reason enough?" The vice leader laughed angrily. "This reason is not bad indeed, but coincidentally, your father has found the Four Seasons Tower an eyesore for a very long time as well. Others may be afraid of you, but I, the thousand-armed ape, Yu Fei, am not." Yu Fei hollered, "Children, come out and kill this monster." Rustling noises could be heard as silhouettes leaped up from almost every corner. Even from underground, silhouettes in black were surging out. In the span of a few breaths, there were more than 30 people surrounding Venerable Lord Sword. There was no way out. Venerable Lord Sword did not budge, chuckling coldly as his sword light intensified. "Are all of you out? Very well, very well. Let's go to the underworld together, we won't be lonely." With another sneer, snowflakes fluttered and frost covered the ground. Venerable Lord Snow and Venerable Lord Frost appeared at the same time when Venerable Lord Sword's sword light intensified. One of them pushed from the left while the other from the right. As soon as they appeared and attacked, 7 to 8 people were sent flying with cries of agony. When they landed on the ground, they were already covered in frost and their bodies were stiff. It was obvious that they would not be able to survive. The 3 great supreme experts joined hands, unleashing a great massacre. Yu Fei was shocked, but he did not panic. He counterattacked, parrying left and right. His long whip was like a divine dragon, blocking the 3 venerable lords' ferocious attacks. He even exhaled and said, "The Merciless Tower and the 4 Seasons Tower have never interfered with each other. Back in the martial world, we had an agreement not to invade each other. Today, the 3 venerable lords have come and started a massacre. What is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this? The 4 Seasons Tower has to give us an explanation for this." In the beginning, he had been very firm with his words, but now he was asking for an explanation. Clearly, he already had the intention to retreat. Shwa! Venerable Lord's sword aimed at his throat like a venomous dragon, his sword gleaming. Preaching and reasoning are meaningless to someone who is about to die. Is it important whether a sect that is about to be annihilated interesting or not? Hearing this, Yu Fei became even angrier and attacked with all his strength. Yu Fei's cultivation base was already at an astounding level. Due to the 3 venerable lords' actions, he knew that they were determined to kill him and that there was no turning back. Naturally, he gave it his all. With the help of the remaining dozen assassins, he did not fall into a disadvantageous position against the 3 venerable lords' all-out attack. In spite of this, the 3 venerable lords' combined abilities were still at an advantage. In addition, they were well coordinated, their silhouettes crisscrossed, moving back and forth. Each time they moved, at least one assassin from the Merciless Tower would fall. Yu Fei bellowed, trying his best to save them. However, he was only one person. Even though his cultivation base was slightly higher than the 3 venerable lords, he could not stop all 3 of them at the same time. As the battle went on, the Merciless Tower's men were dying more and more. The situation was getting more and more disadvantageous. Yu Fei came to a realization. If his subordinates were all dead and these 3 men were still determined to besiege him, he might even be in danger of dying in this battle. With that thought, Yu Fei let out a loud roar. His face suddenly turned red, and a greenish-red gas suddenly emerged from his body. The long whip in his hand danced rapidly like a violent storm. It was obvious that he was using the limit of his cultivation to forcefully stop the 3 venerable ones, trapping them within the shadow of the whip. Then, he suddenly roared, "Retreat!" Almost at the same time, there was a soft bang, and several smoke bombs exploded at the same time. The entire courtyard was immediately plunged into an atmosphere where one couldn't even see their own fingers. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The dozen or so assassins of the Merciless Tower who were lucky enough to survive reacted quickly. They dashed up the yard wall and disappeared in a flash. Another long howl was heard as a series of collisions of qi came from the thick fog. A silhouette flashed and Yu Fei's slender body had also dashed up the yard wall. He hollered coldly, "The mountains will never change, and the rivers will always flow. The Merciless Tower will definitely return the favor that the venerable lords of sword, snow, and frost have bestowed upon us today. Until we meet again." The 3 venerable lords dashed out of the thick fog only to see Yu Fei's body shoot backward from the top of the wall. Like a rainbow, he swayed in the air for a moment before disappearing. If he escaped here, there's still the other side. The 3 of them were not discouraged nor did they tarry. Wiping away their sweat, they left in a flash. As the vice leader of the Merciless Tower, Yu Fei's cultivation base was so powerful that it exceeded the 3 venerable lords' expectations. The 3 of them had joined forces and yet they could not defeat him. This was the first time they had encountered something like this. All 3 of them were vaguely worried. What would happen to the Merciless Tower's leader, Henbili's cultivation base? Despite their worries, they still had to kill those who needed to be killed. Tonight, he would not hold back at all. After this night, after the Hall of Crimson Blade, the Merciless Tower's assassins who had come to Tiantang City were also mercilessly purged by the Four Seasons Tower. There were a total of 4 strongholds, and all of them were slaughtered. Similarly, no one was left alive, and not even the chickens and dogs were spared. The Merciless Tower had more than 4 strongholds in Tiantang City. However, when the 3 of them rushed to the other strongholds, they were already empty. Assassins were the most vigilant, constantly paying attention to their surroundings and their own safety. The fact that the 3 venerable lords could succeed 4 times was already due to the suddenness of the incident, catching the Merciless Tower off guard. Knowing that the other party intended to kill them all, how could they not order their men to retreat? If the Merciless Tower did not even have such a countermeasure, it would be a waste of its reputation as one of the top assassin organizations in the world. Regardless of whether the Merciless Tower's response was timely or not, the Merciless Tower had still lost more than 100 men despite only 4 strongholds being destroyed. This was a devastating number for the Merciless Tower. After a night, the 3 venerable lords did not stop their actions. They hastily gathered the Four Seasons Tower's men in Tiantang City. None of the Four Seasons Tower's men were simple. They knew that the 3 venerable lords had suddenly attacked the 2 top assassin organizations in Tiantang City, but they did not know the reason, so they did not act rashly. Now that they were summoned by the 3 venerable lords, they knew that Venerable Lord Ice had fallen in the hands of the Hall of Crimson Blade's leader, and that the many twists and turns of the incident were closely related to the Merciless Tower and the concourse of the underworld. We vow to avenge Venerable Lord Ice. However, just as the Four Seasons Tower's men gathered and were about to carry out the next step of the massacre, a startling firework suddenly appeared in the sky above Tiantang City. It was a blood-red rocket with the word "kill" written on it. It exploded in the sky of Tiantang City with a shrill whistle. The blood-red "kill" word hung in the air, strangely, for almost 2 hours. In addition, the blood-red word continued to enlarge and rise within these 2 hours. It grew taller and bigger until it could be seen clearly from thousands of miles away. Those who had a bit of insight were shaken. He only felt a gust of cold air coming out from his back. It was a dictum of death. The last resort of the 3 assassin organizations. Chapter 569. It was said to be the highest because the target of this summon was all the assassins in the world. It was not limited to a sect, a gang, a association, or a hall. As long as one was an assassin, he or she had to obey the summon. The reason why the summon had such a high authority was that it was the assassin's summon that had been set up by Sun Changkong, the unrivaled expert and unrivaled assassin in the past. Sun Changkong had dominated the world back then, killing his way through the universe, suppressing all the heroes in the world into submission, not daring to defy him. It was also this person who had come up with the dictum of death in view of the endless killings in the martial world and the fact that the assassins were willing to sell their lives for money, unscrupulous and unscrupulous. Deep in his bones, it was to restrain the actions of the world's assassins. Even after this person had passed away, the dictum of death was still revered by the world's assassins as a divine artifact. No one dared to violate it. This dictum of death had always been enshrined by the Merciless Tower. This was also the root of the Merciless Tower's growth and its greatest source of confidence in disobeying the concourse of the underworld. Now, the dictum of death had actually been activated. Anyone with a bit of knowledge and insight who knew what this token represented could not help but feel a chill in their hearts as they looked at the dictum of death hovering in the sky. The dictum of death. Yin Yang lifted his head to look at the sky, a faint smile on his face. It looks like Hen Bieli is really infuriated now. He can't hold it in anymore. First Court King Qingguang chuckled coldly. Hen Bieli thinks he can stay out of this and watch the fight from the sidelines. Isn't he the one who sent out the dictum of death for help now? What a slap to his own face. Yin Yang stood with his arms behind his back and said with a faint smile, "No one, no sect, can have the confidence to win when faced with the Four Seasons Tower's terrifying attack. The concourse of the underworld has already told everyone with reality. How would the Merciless Tower dare to try? Still, I don't understand. First Court King Qingguang scratched his head and said, "How did Sword, Snow, and Frost find the Merciless Tower? This doesn't make sense." According to legend, the Hall of Crimson Blade's leader, Hong Zhan, and Hen Bieli are sworn brothers. They're very close as brothers. Now that Hong Zhan has vanished without a trace, of course, Venerable Lord Sword, Snow, and Frost will have to look for Hen Bieli, who's most likely to know Hong Zhan's whereabouts. Actually, even if the Four Seasons Tower did not make the first move, the Merciless Tower would have secretly joined the battle between Hong Zhan's Hall of Crimson Blade and the Four Seasons Tower. According to the information I received, Hong Zhan has already met up with Hen Bieli outside the city. This proves that the three Venerable Lords' decision to strike first and eliminate the Merciless Tower's combat power was a foresight. Yin Yang smiled faintly. First Court King Qingguang was hit with a sudden realization. So that's how it is. This is a secret. Even the concourse of the underworld has no prior knowledge of this. Before he finished, he had another question, but how did Sword, Snow, and Frost know about this? Is the Four Seasons Tower's intelligence network so vast? Yin Yang looked at him thoughtfully, a meaningful smile hanging on the corners of his lips as he said faintly, "That's not it. I was the one who revealed this information to them. They'll owe me a favor anyway. The more the merrier, isn't it?" First Court King Qingguang was speechless. The real culprit who stirred up the situation was sitting right in front of him. "But how did you know?" "Intelligence that even the concourse of the underworld and the Four Seasons Tower don't know about should be considered top-secret information, right?" First Court King Qingguang asked after some time. Yin Yang chuckled. "Of course I have my own information sources. I'm going against the Four Seasons Tower. Even if my combat power isn't as good as theirs, what's the point of fighting then?" Ever since Shui Wuyin had integrated the Nine Supremes intelligence network, Yin Yang had learned too many of the world's secrets. Especially now that these assassins were all inside and outside of Tiantang City, in Shui Wuyin's base camp. If he could not even find out about this, Shui Wuyin might as well kill himself. Once this dictum of death is released, the world's assassins will definitely gather here. First Court King Qingguang's eyes were burning with passion. That's the holy relic in the hearts of the world's assassins. Since the beginning of time, there hasn't been a second person other than Sun Changkong who could have such an achievement. The unrivaled assassin in the world. The unrivaled expert in the world. To be able to dedicate one's life as an assassin under the dictum of death is the dream of us assassins. The appearance of the dictum of death is also what the world's assassins want to see. Once the dictum of death is out, the martial world will submit. This isn't just for show. How many assassins do you think the Merciless Tower can gather with the dictum of death this time? Yin Yang asked slowly. A conservative estimate. First Court King Qingguang calculated in his mind and said, 10,000 people, this number is definitely there. Besides, these are only assassins in the heaven realm. The actual number of people who will come will only be more. The dictum of death may not be too attractive to the assassins who have established their own sects, but to the lone assassins, especially the famous ones, it holds a sacred meaning. Sun Changkong had always been a loner back then, roaming the world alone. 10,000 people? 10,000 heaven realm cultivators? King Qingguang, aren't you exaggerating a little too much? Yin Yang asked in surprise. It was not that Yin Yang was a coward, but the number that King Qingguang had reported was a little too exaggerated. Yin Yang's friends and enemies had long surpassed the limit of the heaven realm, but a heaven realm cultivator was still a pinnacle level in this world. In the eyes of ordinary people, the most powerful person in this world was only a 10th perfection grandmaster. The heaven realm, on the other hand, was a legendary level that was a step further than 10th perfection. Liang Yunqi, the dragon of clouds who had lost his life in the residence of 9 supremes, was only a 10th perfection, but he was already a legend in the empire of Dayuan. Now, King Qingguang was talking about 10,000 heaven realm assassins. Was this not a joke? Young Master Yun's knowledge is too limited. There are many capable people in the martial world. The more famous one is, the more capable he is. The number of expert assassins scattered in the martial world is even more uncountable. Once this dictum of death is announced, it will sweep through the martial world like a hurricane. As long as there's enough time, even those assassins who are far away in the snowy plains, endless deserts, and endless oceans will rush over. This is the power of the dictum of death, or rather, its beauty. The 10,000 I mentioned is really the most conservative estimate. It's also limited to the number of people who can be gathered within 7 days. As for how many can be gathered after a longer period of time, it's impossible to estimate. 10,000 Heaven Realm assassins was only a conservative estimate. The final number of people who would be gathered could not be estimated. Yin Yang was shocked once more, but he was immediately overjoyed. This was good news. If all these people were to go against the Four Seasons Tower, TSK, just thinking about it made him excited. Then, the Four Seasons Tower's strength in Tiantang City is insufficient. It's far from enough, Yun Yang said quietly. That's right. As long as these assassins can contribute once, the Four Seasons Tower's current manpower won't be able to withstand a single blow. First Court King Qingguang said rather delightedly, not to mention that there are many nameless mysterious assassins in the martial world whose cultivation base is terrifyingly high. Any one of them would be enough to wipe out Venerable Lord Sword, Snow, and Frost. Yin Yang thought about it quietly and said, that won't do either. The imbalance of strength between both sides is detrimental to the subsequent plans. Also, it's far from the point where the Hall of Crimson Blade and the Merciless Tower are at their wits' end. Why would the Merciless Tower's Hen Bieli release the dictum of death at this time? I'm afraid there's more to it than meets the eye. Yin Yang looked at First Court King Qingguang. First Court King Qingguang chuckled humorlessly. There's more to it than meets the eye. The concourse of the underworld is now crippled. I guess Hen Bieli has long thought of using the dictum of death to command the world's assassins. He's probably waiting for the right time. Once the time is ripe and the dictum of death is released, as long as 1/10 of the assassins who hear the news join the Merciless Tower will be the top assassin sect of all time. Besides, there's no need to worry about the concourse of the underworld suppression now. Now that the Four Seasons Tower has struck, it's considered as giving Hen Bieli a more unique excuse. I see. I didn't expect there to be such a deeper meaning to this. Yin Yang frowned and said, I'm going out for a while. First Court King Qingguang asked sensitively, you're going to look for Sword, Snow, and Frost? Yin Yang replied, of course, it won't do if we're annihilated so easily. The enemy of my enemy isn't necessarily my friend. It could be an accomplice or a troublemaker. Tipping off the enemy is still the least of my loyalty as a martial world person. Yin Yang said with a righteous expression. Yin Yang left, amidst King Qingguang's pained expression. Chapter 570. Venerable Lord Sword and the others were in a large mansion, their faces solemn. The moment the dictum of death appeared, the pressure on the three of them was equally great. The dictum of death can basically prove that Yun Yang's words are true. The Merciless Tower has indeed colluded with the Hall of Crimson Blade and both parties have merged. Now that the world's assassins have gathered here, the situation is very disadvantageous to us. Right now, we have less than 200 people on our side. Among them, there were only 7 heaven stage or higher experts among them. This power is too weak. The disparity between the strong and the weak is too great to be compared. What do we do now? Both venerable lords looked at Venerable Lord Snow, who was pacing back and forth in deep thought. Venerable Lord Snow frowned, deep in thought. What should he do? This is a problem. At this moment, an elegant voice was heard. Are the 3 venerable ones here? Yin Yang. Yin Yang had actually come at this time. Young Master Yun, please come in. Venerable Lord Snow's eyes brightened. To the 3 of them, Yun Yang's cultivation base was already impressive. What was more commendable was his resourcefulness and his ability to adapt at will. He could be considered superhuman. The three of them were naturally fearless when they fought in the martial world, but they could hardly come up with a countermeasure in the face of such a chaotic situation. Having Yun Yang's help in brainstorming was, of course, the best scenario. The wind blew. Yun Yang, dressed in purple, had already arrived at the courtyard and was walking slowly towards the room. Young Master Yun has come at the right time. Venerable Lord Snow frowned with a sullen expression. The current situation, Yun Yang sucked in a breath and said, I'm here for this. Venerable Lord Frost said, would like to hear your opinion. This time, even Venerable Lord Sword had lifted his head, looking at Yun Yang's face expectantly. It was evident that the three Venerable Ones were at a loss for what to do. It was true that the three of them wanted to avenge Venerable Lord Ice, and it was also true that they did not care about their own lives. However, the situation had changed with the dictum of death. The top assassins of the entire Tianxian continent had gathered like ants from all directions. Such a huge commotion made even the three Venerable Lords anxious. Even if they thought highly of themselves, they were not arrogant enough to think that the three of them could contend against all the assassins in the world. After all, the three of them had admitted that they were no longer the Venerable Lords of the Four Seasons Tower. Their biggest wish at the moment was to avenge their brother once and for all and then retire to the forest. However, they first went to the Hall of Crimson Blade to seek revenge on Hong Zhan, the murderer of Venerable Lord Ice, but they could not find any trace of him. Using Yun Yang's information, they expanded the scope of attack from the Hall of Crimson Blade to include the Merciless Tower as well. Although they managed to claim more lives, they still could not capture the enemy's leader. In the previous battle, when they had faced the Merciless Tower's vice leader, Yu Fei, the latter's capability had far exceeded their expectations. The three of them were not his match in a one-on-one fight. Even when they had joined forces, they had not been able to hold him back. If they had really faced the Merciless Tower's leader, Hen Bieli, Hong Zhan, who they had been looking for but had yet to meet, as well as Yu Fei, it would have been a 3-on-3 battle. If not, the three Supremes would not have thought of gathering the Four Seasons Tower's men in Tiantang City. In spite of this, they had not expected the Merciless Tower, one of the top assassin organizations in the continent, to directly use the legendary dictum of death when they still had the strength to spare. For a moment, the three of them could not help but be dumbfounded. After all, it should not have been so, no matter how they looked at it. Was this not thinking too highly of the three of them? This treatment was more appropriate for Mr. Nian. Against them, there was no need to use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. With Yun Yang's arrival, the three of them suddenly felt like they had a pillar of support. It was a marvelous feeling. I believe the three of you are aware of the current situation. Not only is the situation complicated, it is extremely disadvantageous to the three of you. Even if the three of you have the Four Seasons Tower as your backup and have a lot of capital, the situation is still difficult. Yin Yang said, we've known each other for a while. There's some kinship between us, especially since the current situation was caused by my message after all. So, Venerable Lord Sword said rather impatiently, stop beating around the bush. Just tell us what to do. Yin Yang chuckled and said unhurriedly, there must be a way. Instead, it depends on what the three Venerable Lords think. Venerable Lord Snow said calmly, may I ask what young Master Yin means? I have 3 solutions for the three of you to choose from. Yin Yang said in a low voice. The three of them brightened when they heard him. The three of them could not come up with a single solution after thinking for a long time, but the other party had come up with 3 solutions? Sure enough, he had a good brain. Was the gap between people really that big? We'd like to hear the details, the three of them said in unison. The best solution, which is also the best way to deal with the current situation, is to leave. Yin Yang said seriously, actually, I don't quite understand what has happened to all of you. After all, the way the three of you have dealt with this time is very different from how the Four Seasons Tower has done things in the past. The three of them nodded, their expressions dark. Yin Yang was the one who had witnessed the 4 Venerable Lords going up against Lei Dongtian and his servant, as well as Mr. Nian stepping in and forcefully taking care of the opponent. He knew the Four Seasons Tower's foundation and strength very well. His own cultivation base and knowledge were extraordinary as well. It was reasonable for him to come to such a conclusion based on the current clues. Although all of you didn't manage to kill Hong Zhan on the spot, many of the Hall of Crimson Blade's men have died in the hands of the three of you. From a certain perspective, it can be said that you've avenged Venerable Lord Ice. I believe he can rest in peace in the netherworld. Yin Yang said earnestly, in my opinion, no matter how powerful the Four Seasons Tower is and how deep its foundation is, there must be a limit. Can it really support the three of you without any limit? If the three of you continue to be entangled like this, it might very well incite the dissatisfaction of the Four Seasons Tower's higher-ups. When that time comes, it might be very disadvantageous for all of you. After all, you've offended one of the top assassin forces in the continent this time. Now that we've achieved a certain level of our goal, why don't we temporarily put aside the established plan and retreat in one piece to preserve ourselves? We'll wait for a better opportunity in the future before we act. This is the best solution. As Yin Yang spoke, the trio's expressions grew increasingly grim. By the time Yin Yang had finished speaking, the trio's faces were as dark as the bottom of a pot. Their gazes towards Yin Yang were filled with hostility. They were all prepared to go all out, but the best solution you suggested was to pour cold water on them? Run away? If we were to run away just like that, would we still need you to come up with any ideas? Even if what you said was very reasonable and the Four Seasons Tower would no longer provide us with their past support, so what? The three of us would still continue to avenge our brothers. We would not rest until we were dead. Absolutely not. Venerable Lord Snow's expression was grim. Our brothers' bones have yet to turn cold, and we have yet to exact our revenge. How can we leave just like that? Even if all three of us die here, we won't leave just like that. Yin Yang sighed and said, since the three of you are so determined, let us talk about the second solution. Actually, the second solution is even simpler than the best solution. It's to defend and wait for reinforcements. Venerable Lord Snow said, defend and wait for reinforcements? What reinforcements? Yin Yang was stunned. What reinforcements can there be? Of course, it's the Four Seasons Tower's reinforcements. In fact, the current situation is similar to the day when the few of you faced my friend, Lei Dongtian. It's just that one is faster than the other. Right now, no matter how amazing the effect of the dictum of death is, there will still be a few days before the world's top assassins gather. I believe the Four Seasons Tower's reinforcements will be able to arrive in time. I still remember the glimpse that day. Although I still have lingering fears, it was truly brilliant and unique in this world. Chapter 571. Was there anything wrong with Yin Yang's plan? From his standpoint, his perspective, and his train of thought, there was nothing wrong at all. The main cause of the situation that day was the death of Venerable Lord Saber. The four Venerable Lords had gone after Lei Dongtian together, but they were restrained by the latter's unique skill. In the end, it was Mr. Nian who appeared and overpowered the enemy. Today, the main cause was the death of a Venerable Lord and the arrest of 3 Venerable Lords. Everything was the same as before. Of course, the Four Seasons Tower's experts would come to their aid. If there were experts like the ones Yin Yang had seen that day, what was there to worry about? The problem now was that Mr. Nian might still come, but he would never help the 3 of them. He would only take away their gods' bones after their deaths. That was all. There are no reinforcements. Venerable Lord Snow said gloomily. How could it be? The Four Seasons Tower is so powerful. How could it? Yin Yang cried out involuntarily, this. Venerable Lord Sword snorted and said with a dark expression, forget it. You're the one who passed on Bing's last words. You know a lot about us, so I'll tell you the truth. We've only just found out that we've been manipulated by the Four Seasons Tower. We call ourselves Venerable Lords, but we're actually puppets. Bing's death is largely due to the Four Seasons Tower's deliberate plan. Yun Yang was dumbfounded. This, Venerable Lord Snow wanted to stop Venerable Lord Sword from speaking. After all, it was not a glorious matter. Once it was exposed, it was also a question of whether Yun Yang's stance would change. However, before he could do so, Venerable Lord Sword had already gotten to the point in one breath. Thinking about it, he sighed and did not speak anymore. This is roughly what happened. Since he had started the conversation, Venerable Lord Sword decided to spill the beans. All three of them felt like they were going to go crazy from holding it in. It was rare to have an audience, and this person was the Four Seasons Tower's enemy. He would never help the Four Seasons Tower sincerely. Come to think of it, it was fine to tell him the truth. Instead, it would make their positions more aligned. Yin Yang listened to Venerable Lord Parting Sword's story in disbelief. After a long time, he finally heaved a sigh of relief and murmured, "My God. This world is too scary, you haven't seen the scarier things yet." Venerable Lord Sword could not help teasing, "How old are you? How many dangers have you seen? You're far from it. In this world, the most sinister thing is the human heart. Everything else is insignificant." Yin Yang sighed, looking rather dejected as he said, "Doesn't this mean that the three of you are now isolated and without help? Then what should we do?" Venerable Lord Sword snorted and said, "I'll tell you the truth. This time, of course, we're here to avenge our brother, but we're also here to stir up some trouble for the Four Seasons Tower. Since they want to use us until they die, we have to repay them no matter what. Kindness must be repaid, and enmity must be avenged." When Yin Yang heard this, he looked like he was still in a daze, as if he was in a dream. "That's how it is." Venerable Lord Sword said straightforwardly, "So, the Four Seasons Tower definitely doesn't have any reinforcements." Wait a minute. Yin Yang raised his hand to stop Venerable Lord Sword from speaking, frowning as he said, "No, it might not be like what you've said. Tell me again. There's still a catch in this, I need to think about it." Venerable Lord Sword was about to lose his temper with a frown. His mood had already taken a turn for the worse, yet he still had to be questioned by a child and repeat it. "Believe it or not, your father will kill you. I'm saying that there might be something we can use in this." Yin Yang explained in a considerate manner, "Say it again. I was confused by what you said just now and didn't quite understand. There might be something I missed out on. It's necessary to deliberate when making a plan. I'm not being long-winded and looking for trouble." Venerable Lord Sword held his breath and sucked in a breath as if he had a toothache. With a long sigh, he repeated his words again patiently, but he was listless throughout. I understand completely." Yin Yang said, "According to your understanding, the current situation has completely become your own problem and has nothing to do with the Four Seasons Tower anymore. Is that right?" The three of them were stunned. Was that not the case? Wasn't this a matter of course, a matter that could be inherited from the same lineage? Yin Yang said, "All of you probably feel that the Four Seasons Tower has let you down and even caused the deaths of your brothers directly and indirectly. Isn't that right? Therefore, all of you feel that you shouldn't belong to the Four Seasons Tower anymore and want to break away to avenge your brothers. It would be even better if you could create some trouble for the Four Seasons Tower at the same time. Then, all of you can leave and live in seclusion in the forest. Is that what you mean?" The three of them nodded, still unsure of the use of Yin Yang repeating something that everyone knew and was certain of. "There's a key point here that all of you seem to have overlooked, or perhaps you've been too sure about it. The current situation is that all of you don't see yourselves as the Four Seasons Tower's men, but the Four Seasons Tower hasn't treated you as outsiders." The three of them were stunned by Yin Yang's words. "Why do you think that the Four Seasons Tower's men won't help you and will only find trouble with you? How is that possible?" Yin Yang glared at them and said, "Does the entire world, including the Four Seasons Tower's Mr. Nian, know that all of you are now puppets? They seem to only know that all of you are still loyal high-ranking members of the Four Seasons Tower. Isn't that right? Then, when you encounter a crisis that you can't handle, it's only natural that you seek help from the Four Seasons Tower. Actually, the current situation is no different from the battle with Lei Dongtian that day. It's really just a difference of speed and slowness. Therefore, it's only right that all of you seek help from the Four Seasons Tower's headquarters. What's more, if you don't ask for help and continue to fight on your own, not only will it make you look guilty, it'll also make you think that you're disloyal. The Four Seasons Tower will send someone to kill you and retrieve God's bone, just based on your current predicament. However, all of you have asked for help so boldly. I think the Four Seasons Tower won't leave you be and will definitely send experts to support you. Do you think that I'm wrong? When the three of them heard this, their eyes lit up in unison, and for a time, they were completely enlightened. Therefore, whether it's for self-preservation or for revenge, it's necessary to seek help. It's imperative. There will definitely be a response. Yin Yang said patiently, as for the reason for your conflict with the two top assassin organizations, it's very simple and normal. Venerable Lord Ice has been killed and you seek revenge out of anger. It's the same reason you sought Lei Dongtian that day. Is there a problem? Before Venerable Lord Ice died, all of you have never seen Venerable Lord Ice. This isn't hard to prove, is it? The biggest problem right now, or rather, the key problem, is that the Four Seasons Tower doesn't know that all of you already know something that you shouldn't know. With this as the premise, what can't you do? In fact, whether it's you or the Four Seasons Tower, there's another reason that must not be left out, to retrieve Ice God's bone. The only difference is that all of you are here to retrieve your brother's remains while the Four Seasons Tower will never allow God's bone to fall into the hands of other forces, am I right? Yin Yang spread his arms. As long as the Four Seasons Tower doesn't know that Ice God's bone is in your hands, this plan is flawless. Therefore, one of the reasons is that when Venerable Lord Ice died and you weren't there, the Ice God's bone fell into the hands of the Hall of Crimson Blade. The Hall of Crimson Blade colluded with the Merciless Tower to protect the Ice God's bone. You want it back, am I right? Yin Yang heaved a sigh of relief. He thought to himself, thank goodness I came. These three idiots never intended to do so. Chapter 572. All in all, it's perfectly justifiable for all of you to seek out the Hall of Crimson Blade, provoke the Merciless Tower and even provoke the reappearance of the Dictum of Death. Whether it's for the bone of the Ice God from the inside or to support the three of you on the surface, the Four Seasons Tower will definitely lend a helping hand. Yin Yang said, if that's the case, it doesn't seem to be a difficult task to drag the Four Seasons Tower into this vortex. When the reinforcements arrive, all you have to do is lead them into a few tough battles and kill a few more of their men. By then, if you feel that it's enough, you can just leave. However, the Four Seasons Tower won't be able to leave. They'll continue to be entangled until one side is completely annihilated. Isn't that right? Even if all of you still don't want to leave and want to carry out your revenge to the end, as long as you don't reveal any flaws, the Four Seasons Tower won't give up on you first. Yin Yang looked incredulous. That's why I really don't understand what all of you are thinking. Why do you think that you don't have any reinforcements? Three venerable lords, you obviously have the most powerful reinforcements in this world. Let me ask you something else. Why do you think the Dictum of Death was issued? Yin Yang said, is it for the three of you? Wrong. Very wrong. Yin Yang hollered resolutely, the Dictum of Death is actually targeted at the Four Seasons Tower. Venerable Lord Snow's eyes grew brighter. Exchanging glances with Venerable Lord Sword and Venerable Lord Frost, they looked enlightened and enlightened. That's right. We don't see ourselves as the Four Seasons Tower's men. We already know the Four Seasons Tower's secret against us. However, the crux of the problem was that Mr. Nian and the others still did not know about it. Just like what Yun Yang had said, the current situation was a replica of the battle against Lei Dongtian. Brilliant. Venerable Lord Snow stroked his chin. That's right. Venerable Lord Sword's eyes glinted as his aura regained its vigor, no longer as dispirited as before. Resourceful and resourceful indeed. Venerable Lord Frost looked at Yun Yang with delight. Obviously, the three of them had already thought of what to do next and how to proceed. Now that we're done with the two strategies, let's talk about the last resort. This last resort isn't much. Before Yun Yang could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Venerable Lord Snow. There's no need to talk about the last resort. Let's use this middle resort. This middle resort is already the best strategy to deal with the current situation. Yin Yang sweated. Listen to me first, this is a bad plan, you don't know how to use it anyway. What's the point of saying this? The more you waste, the more time we'll waste. Venerable Lord Sword said as if it was a matter of fact, it's decided then. Yin Yang fell silent at once. You guys are really swift and decisive. Since the three of you have made your decision, I won't say anything unnecessary. However, I still have to remind you. Yin Yang said, when the reinforcements arrive, you must pay attention to your own emotions, expressions, and other aspects. Maintain control and ensure that you don't reveal any flaws. Otherwise, the three of you will really be finished. Venerable Lord Snow was displeased and said, how many years have we been in the martial world? Don't tell me that we don't even understand this. Yin Yang nodded with a smile on his face, but in his heart, he thought, I'm really afraid that the three of you don't know, there's no time to lose. I'll contact the tower immediately. Venerable Lord Snow stood up abruptly. The other party has already sent out the dictum of death. The number of top-notch assassins in Tianxian continent is definitely not a small number. If we're too slow, we might be dismembered. Our reinforcements haven't even arrived yet. That would be terrible. Yin Yang agreed. That's right, this matter should be done sooner rather than later. Let's do it then. Venerable Lord Frost looked at Yun Yang with squinted eyes, a faint smile on his face. Young Master Yun, you're indeed Yutong's most loyal official. You've really gone through a lot of trouble and resorted to all means just to cause some trouble for the Four Seasons Tower. Yin Yang was displeased and said, what are you saying, Venerable Lord Frost? Firstly, I'm doing you a favor. Secondly, the Four Seasons Tower and the Empire of Yutong have an irreconcilable grudge. Shouldn't I be looking for trouble for them? Isn't it appropriate? Of course, of course. It's extremely appropriate. Venerable Lord Frost chuckled bitterly. He had never seen someone so straightforward and undisguised. Please, don't expose me. Yin Yang exhorted, I've done all I can for all of you. If you betray me again, I'll die a wronged death, absolutely not. The three of them swore solemnly. The enemy of the enemy was indeed a great helper. There was no way to reason this out. Ask for help immediately. Venerable Lord Snow and the others had decided on a plan. They would execute it immediately, just in case. The preparations were complete. Yin Yang left directly, feeling relaxed and at ease. It was a feeling of comfort that he had never felt during this period of time. However, on the way back, Yin Yang had completely let go of this matter and turned his attention to other matters. As long as the three venerable lords did not make any mistakes, it was a foregone conclusion that the Four Seasons Tower would be plunged into an unprecedented challenge by the world's assassins. With Mr. Nian's high opinion of himself and the Four Seasons Tower's reputation, they would never give up on the three venerable lords and avoid this battle. Yin Yang believed that a good show would unfold for quite some time. It was foreseeable that both sides would suffer a great loss in strength, which was what Yin Yang was more than happy to see. The combat power gathered by both sides was far beyond what Yin Yang could handle. Any slight contact would cause severe damage. Therefore, it was already the most he could do to facilitate this situation. The rest had to stay out of it as much as possible and reap the spoils from the sidelines. Therefore, other things that should have been done a long time ago could be put on the agenda. His father's vengeance was still unresolved. Ever since the despicable Ouyang Shaoxi left Zilong City, there had been no trace of him. Shui Wuyin was almost driven to death by Yun Yang, but even with the Nine Supreme's current intelligence network, there was still no news. It was as if this person had vanished from this world. The appearance of the dictum of death this time might be a great opportunity to find this bastard. Ouyang Shaoxi was a top-notch assassin who was as famous as my father back then. Maybe he'll be here for the meeting too. Murderous intent flashed in Yun Yang's eyes. If one were to talk about who Yun Yang hated the most at the moment, Mr. Nian would still be at the top of the list, but the person who ranked second was Ouyang Shaoxi. Father Dugu's vengeance was Yun Yang's biggest worry at the moment. Pay full attention to Ouyang Shaoxi's whereabouts. Yun Yang sent out the message. Shui Wuyin, who received the message, looked pale. He had never relaxed. Who would dare to let their guard down when you urged them 8 times a day? However, the problem was, they really could not find him. In front of the residence of Yun Yang, who was preoccupied, had just walked through the door when he saw a slender silhouette flashing from under the flowering tree like a frightened rabbit, quietly entering the west room. It was Ji Lingxi. Yun Yang heaved a long sigh in his heart. In the past few days, not only had Yun Yang been searching for Yu Rolan's whereabouts, Ji Lingxi had also been searching for Yu Rolan's whereabouts, but her efforts had been futile. Hence, whenever Yun Yang came back from outside, Ji Lingxi would stand there and stare at him, her eyes filled with anticipation. Each time Yun Yang saw the yearning in her pretty eyes, it was as if his heart had been struck hard. Each time, Yun Yang would respond with silence. There was no result. After so many times, Yun Yang could no longer say comforting words like "no news is good news." Ji Lingxi's gaze, on the other hand, dimmed. Gradually, when she saw Yun Yang's expression, she went back to her room without a word. She did not say a word throughout the entire process. However, the silence was not as good as the presence of words. Anyone could feel the pain of hiding all the entanglement and agony in her heart. Yun Yang did not see Ji Lingxi come out to welcome him in recent days. It looked like she had given up on finding Yu Rolan's whereabouts. However, the glimpse just now made Yun Yang realize that it was not that Ji Lingxi did not want to ask, she just did not want to add additional pressure to him, knowing that there would be no result. Chapter 573. Who is it? Ji Lingxi asked in a trembling voice. The chair creaked as if someone had stood up abruptly. Who is it? It's me. Yun Yang answered. The door opened with a creak. Ji Lingxi's silhouette appeared at the door, her eyes looking at Yun Yang. Her gaze was filled with sorrow and tiredness, as well as a sense of helplessness and loss. Looking at her gaze, Yun Yang felt his heart skip a beat, a heart-wrenching pain surging into his heart. He recalled the young girl he had first met in Tiantang City. How spirited and youthful she had been, now, she had become like this. It had only been a little more than a year. First, the family had sent her away as a chess piece, which was equivalent to selling her away. After she had escaped the ordeal, she was shocked to hear of the death of her biological brother whom she had been searching for. What followed next was Sister Lan, who had always been by his side. After learning of her brother's death, she resolutely left without saying goodbye. It sounded nice to say that she went somewhere, but in reality, there was a 99% chance that she had followed her brother to the underworld. At this moment, she was the only one left in this vast world. To Ji Lingxi, it was an indescribably cruel situation. Now, she was residing in the residence of Yun. On the surface, it was common knowledge that she liked Yun Yang. Staying in the residence of Yun was equivalent to staying in her sweetheart's home. It was a good thing no matter how one looked at it. However, what was the point of living here without a title or status if one were to really look deeper into it? Even if she liked him, even if she would not marry anyone else, they were not in a relationship after all. The fate of living under someone else's roof was no better than being a rootless duckweed. If she were to leave the residence of Yun now, where could she go in this vast world? Ji Lingxi was distressed. She really had no one to turn to anymore. A year ago, she was still a proud daughter of heaven, standing high above the clouds. Even the four noble families of spring, summer, autumn, and winter did not dare act presumptuously in front of Jilingxi. However, after a year, she had become an orphan, all alone and without anyone to rely on. What a huge difference in status. Truth be told, Jilingxi had yet to break down and lose her mind. Yunyang already felt that this lady was so strong that he was impressed. It was precisely because of this that Yunyang felt a throbbing pain in his heart when he saw the fear and confusion in Jilingxi's eyes. Eighth Brother Supreme Win's last words were for him to take good care of his sister. Had he done it? Sister Lan had also instructed him to take good care of Jilingxi in her letter. Had he done that? For the past few days, he had only been focused on finding sister-in-law Yu's whereabouts, neglecting Jilingxi's feelings and neglecting his eighth brother and eighth sister-in-law's earnest trust. He deserved to die. Lingxi. Yunyang said softly, "It's been hard on you these days." What Yunyang said was very plain and simple, but Jilingxi's eyes welled up instantly when she heard it, tears almost rolling down her cheeks. Ask yourself honestly, have you suffered during this period of time? Bitter. It was so bitter that Jilingxi still thought that she was in a nightmare and had yet to wake up. If she could have a choice in life, Jilingxi would rather erase the past 2 years from her life. It was truly an obstacle at every step, a disaster at every moment. It was hard to have a few days of peace. It's nothing. Jilingxi choked softly and smiled faintly. All of this is fate. It's my fate. I have to accept it. Accept it. Yunyang repeated slowly and said, "Life in this world isn't going your way most of the time. Don't be too sad and don't be at a loss. You must remember that I'm still here with you in this world. No matter what happens, you can rely on me without worry. As long as I'm still here, your support is still here." Jilingxi's eyes shone when she heard him. She lifted her head, her watery eyes looking at Yunyang's face with a myriad of emotions. Rely on each other? Both of us? Was he hinting at something? Just as she was thinking about it, Yunyang said sincerely, "Eighth brother is no longer here, but I'm eighth brother's brother. From now on, I'm your elder brother. I'm your biological elder brother. You're my biological younger sister." Yunyang's tone sounded like he was making a vow, trying his best to give Jilingxi a sense of security as he said from the bottom of his heart, "I'm here for everything. Don't you worry." "Your younger sister?" Jilingxi's gaze that was initially tinged with shyness froze instantly. The slight blush that had just suffused her cheeks turned pale instantly. Her lips quivered before she finally said coldly, "Young Master Yun is a descendant of the heavens. Jilingxi is only a commoner, a commoner. Not only is her status like heaven and earth, she's also plain and unattractive. How could she have the fortune to have an elder brother like young Master Yun? She's out of my league, out of my league." Yunyang said anxiously, "Lingxi, what do you mean by that? Are you doubting the relationship between your brother and me? We're brothers who go through thick and thin together. If he wants my head, I'll cut it off for him without hesitation. You're my eighth brother's only younger sister. Am I still human if I don't take care of you?" The more Yunyang spoke, the colder Jilingxi's expression became. She said in a mocking tone, "Young Master Yun, I didn't know that you're such a loyal and righteous person. This humble girl is extremely grateful and honored." Yunyang said, "Perhaps not to outsiders, but to you, younger sister. I don't want to be your younger sister." Jilingxi lowered her head and made her words clear. Her heart was beating wildly. "You don't want to? That won't do." Yunyang said in shock, "Your brother has made it clear. You're your brother's younger sister, so you're my younger sister. How can there be any doubt about this?" Before he could finish, Jilingxi's face had turned from flushed red to pale white. She cut him off coldly, gritting her teeth and said, "I only have one elder brother in this lifetime." She lifted her head and glared at Yun Yang stubbornly. Her voice was like ice beads falling on a jade plate. I, Ji Lingxi, will never call anyone else brother in this lifetime. There will be no exceptions. Yun Yang was disappointed when he heard her. He could not understand why Ji Lingxi would react so strongly to a mere form of address. He tried to salvage the situation by saying, well, it's fine if you don't call me elder brother. Eighth brother calls me younger brother anyway. If you don't want to call me elder brother, you can call me younger brother, that's fine too. Ji Lingxi was utterly enraged. She stood up and said angrily, are you done? I don't want to have any other elder brother, I don't want any younger brother either. What elder brother or younger brother? Go to hell. She was so enraged that her voice was uncontrollably shrill and her words were unusually jumbled. Yun Yang was even more flustered and confused, not knowing how he had angered her. He asked blankly, then what do you plan to call me? He thought to himself, I can't even call you uncle or sir. That's a difference in seniority. Even if you really did call me that, I wouldn't dare agree to it. Otherwise, eighth brother will definitely teach me a lesson when I see him. Taking advantage of you is the same as taking advantage of eighth brother. Do you think it's so easy to take advantage of eighth brother? It had to be said that a certain person's IQ and EQ were truly frightening. He was even more ignorant than Xiao Bai. If Ji Lingfeng was really here at this moment, he definitely wouldn't argue with a certain person. He would just leave the north and the south and beat up that bastard. What do I want to call you? Is there even a need to ask? Ji Lingxi hollered in a low, flustered voice when she heard his lame question, call you a blockhead. Call you a dummy, alright? Is that alright? Ah. Yun Yang sighed and said humbly, that works too. Up to you, as long as you're happy. I'll respond to whatever you call me. Who asked you to be my younger sister? If I don't dote on you, who will? His heart was filled with helplessness, thinking that eighth brother's younger sister had a strange temper. She was still fine just a moment ago, but she had suddenly turned hostile. All right, do as you please. I won't argue with you. Younger sister. Why can't you let go of your younger sister? Ji Lingxi's breath was stuck in her chest. For a moment, she felt like she was seeing stars. The feeling of being tongue-tied and about to pass out surged over her, pushing her to the brink of breaking down. How could there be such a blockhead in this world? Nothing is too strange in this world. How could I have met him and taken a liking to him? How dare he call himself the Nine Supremes' think tank with such a brain? Ji Lingxi said hatefully, I've confirmed one thing today. My brother's death was unjust. Yun Yang sighed, his voice pained as he said, yes. Now that I think about it, it was indeed unjust. We've gone through so many bloody battles for the Empire of Yutong back then, but there were still so many traitors. If it wasn't for those bastards, my brothers wouldn't have. Before he could finish, Ji Lingxi stood up abruptly. Her face was as cold as frost, her eyes glinting with an uncontrollable ferocity. Young Master Yun, is there anything else? She was already chasing him away. If you don't chase him away, I'm going to beat him up, I can't take it anymore. As he wrote this chapter, he suddenly sighed as he recalled his past. I was 20 that year, working as a temporary worker in my unit. A girl from the same unit would think of ways to torment me every day. Every day after work at noon, she would insist on following me to my house for meals. Today, tomorrow, and the day after. It went on for a week and I finally couldn't take it anymore. I scolded her, my family isn't rich, how can you come here every day to eat? It's not like you don't have a home, it's not far. It's even closer than my house. I didn't go anymore. Today, I suddenly recalled what my mother said to me, looking at me helplessly. Son, you're 20. Facepalm. Chapter 574. Yun Yang stood up awkwardly. Ah, no more. Ah. What do you want by saying this? Ji Lingxi was cold, suppressing the rage within her as she gritted her teeth and said, "If there's nothing else, please go back and rest. It's so late now. It's inconvenient for a man and a woman to be alone in my room." Yin Yang chuckled inappropriately. What inconvenience can there be when I'm with my younger sister in the room? Ji Lingxi broke down. I said that I want to rest. Are you going out or not? She gritted her teeth, her face ashen, her eyes spitting fire. Yin Yang was stunned. He carefully recalled all the words he had said since he entered the room, feeling more and more confused. I didn't offend her. What I said didn't particularly offend anyone either. I was just going along with what she said. What was going on? Why did her expression change so suddenly? You could have just said it nicely if you wanted to rest. Did you have to be so angry? Yin Yang was dumbfounded, his eyes filled with bewilderment. Until the moment he stepped out of the door, he turned his head back and said, "Rest well then, Lingxi. Remember to tell, big brother." Yin Yang, it was obvious that a certain someone did not know how to address him and had used Yin Yang, directly. His EQ was really too high. Bang! With a loud bang, the room door slammed shut violently in front of Yin Yang, almost squeezing a certain someone's nose through the gap of the door. Ji Lingxi leaned against the door and slowly slid down to sit on the floor. She covered her face with both hands and sighed softly. She punched the floor with one hand and sighed softly. How can there be such a man in this world? Truly, didn't they say that men are all lecherous? How can there be such a thing? This is too strange. Calling him a blockhead is an insult to blockheads. Recalling how Yin Yang had asked her to think of a title, such as elder brother, younger brother, and in the end, even blockheads and idiots were fine, she could not help chuckling and mumbling hatefully, "What a blockhead. Idiot. Idiot." Sigh. Then, she recalled her current situation and could not help feeling dejected and self-pitying. When Sister Lan was around, Ji Lingxi would feel embarrassed when she heard Sister Lan and Yin Yang talk about their worries bit by bit and would often stop them. But only now did he realize that when facing such a fool, it would be impossible not to have such a matchmaker by his side. What should I call you? What do you think I should call you? I've made it very clear just now. I don't want to call you big brother or little brother. As long as you're a man, you should understand, right? Do you expect me, a lady, to directly say to you, "I want to be your wife"? Call you that? Like that? However, the people here were stubborn. What could they do? If Ji Lingxi could not see that Yin Yang was not putting on an act, pretending to be someone else but was truly ignorant, she would have thought that Yin Yang had no feelings for her at all. Otherwise, he would not have acted this way. But that was exactly why it was so bad. How could they communicate with such a person on a deeper level? Weirdo. Ji Lingxi covered her face, speechless, sighing helplessly. What a weirdo. Just as Yin Yang turned around, he saw his cheapskate father, Marquis Yun. No, he was now King Xiaoyao. Yun Xiaoyao's arms were behind his back, staring at him with a strange gaze, sizing him up like he was looking at some rare existence. Yin Yang lowered his head to look at himself. His clothes did not seem to be torn, and he asked in surprise, "What is it? What's with that look?" Yin Xiaoyao shook his head and sighed, saying, "What look?" The look of looking at a peerless weirdo. I've come to take a look at the unique weirdo that has never existed in this world since the creation of heaven and earth. I want to see how he looks like, how unique his physique is and how gifted he is. Yin Yang chuckled and caressed his face, saying with a hint of smugness, "It's fine as long as it's known to our own people." You've announced it so blatantly. Although it's the truth and it sounds good, it's still a little like flattery after all. Don't tell me you have something to ask of me? Yin Xiaoyao's throat made a strange sound as he almost spat it out. He tried his best to hold back his laughter as he nodded and said, "It's true that we know ourselves best. You're really a weirdo, a rare and rare one. Yin Yang chuckled and said, "You're going a little overboard. I've never undervalued myself and my cultivation-based progress isn't slow, but to say that I'm rare and rare, is it still an exaggeration? There have been so many experts since the ancient times, so many legends and myths." Before he could finish his words, Yun Xiaoyao had already disappeared. He had actually left. Yun Xiaoyao's uncontrollable laughter came from the faraway garden, as if he had seen something funny. "Ha ha ha ha," Yun Yang shook his head. "What kind of person is this? His words are unclear, his words are incoherent, there's no end to them. He doesn't even finish his words when he praises someone." As he mumbled, he walked back to his room. As he did so, he thought to himself, if the Four Seasons Tower were to really make a move, how powerful would they be? What changes would it bring to the current situation? Also, is there a possibility that the Four Seasons Tower won't make a move? This isn't so absolute. Also, if Ouyang Shaoxi doesn't come, how should I proceed on my end? The plan that I've been preparing for a long time, when can it be executed? Although letting it out at this time will make the water even more murky, will it be beneficial to my side? It's better to wait and see how the situation develops. If the conflict between both sides continues to escalate, it'll be difficult to take advantage of the situation. Perhaps I can put the main force on the sects that have betrayed the ancestral vow and participated in the war between the two empires. It's necessary to think of a way to get rid of them. I can't just let out some harsh words and there'll be no more news. Come to think of it, there are indeed a lot of things that need to be dealt with now. Each and every one of them is complicated." Yin Yang heaved a long sigh, feeling that even if he had 3 heads and 6 arms, he might not be able to handle everything. Shui Wuyin sighed has to continue making haste. "Right, what are the 4 fellows, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, busy with during this period of time? Why haven't I heard anything from them for such a long time? These 4 fellows are all troublemakers. I hope they don't cause any trouble." Thinking of this, Yun Yang turned and walked towards the East Stride Yard. Just as Yun Yang left, silhouettes flashed in the dark. Bai Yixue and Fang Mafei appeared with their hands over their mouths. They were laughing so hard that their bodies were convulsing, almost cramping. "King Yun is right. Our young master is truly the one and only wonder since the beginning of the world. He's unprecedented and will never be able to surpass him. He's the only one in the world. I have never been impressed by anyone in my life, but I'm truly impressed by our young master." Bai Yixue sighed as he rubbed his stomach. He could not help it. He had covered his mouth and dared not laugh out loud just now, causing his stomach to ache. If he did not deal with it, he might suffer from internal injuries. Fang Mafei held his stomach as well. "I can't help but be impressed. He's definitely the best since the beginning of time, unrivaled in this world." Bai Yixue sighed and murmured, "If a lady were to treat me like this, I'm afraid I'd have to carry my son out by now. Our young master is actually incessant with his brothers, he can even be an idiot. If I don't have King admire him, I'd be going against my conscience, I'd feel guilty." Pfft. Fang Mafei spat into the sky and guffawed again, continuing for a long time. Chapter 575. Somewhere. Someone was scolding and beating someone up. "Bam bam bam, bam bam, bastard. Didn't I tell you to protect your sister when I asked you to go out? Is this how you protect her? Do you know that she's suffering now because of your lack of dedication, your inaction, your irresponsibility? Protect? What do you mean by protect? Leaving her behind and coming back yourself is considered protection? Bastard. Now, my daughter has become an orphan. Lonely and destitute. What a bastard. How is this possible? How can this be? This hurts my heart so much." Bam bam bam, someone tried to calm him down. "Don't hit him. You asked for it. Besides, if you are angry, you can hit your own son. Why are you hitting my son? Was he trying to calm him down? These bastards, I'll beat them up 8 times a day. That won't vent my anger. Let's go, son. Come home with me. Son, let's go back too. If we worry here, we'll be bullied and beaten. There's no such thing in this world. Oh right, just leave them here and let them beat their own son to death. That will be enough, let's go, let's not waste time with this idiot anymore. The group of people left. Someone was furious. Leave your bastard here. I haven't had enough of beating you up. Only a few snorts answered him. One of them said coldly, my son. I can't even bear to hit him. You hit him so easily. Don't think I didn't see it. You didn't use any strength when you hit your son, but you didn't show any mercy when you hit my son. Just you wait, your sister-in-law is coming to find you soon. She will let you know what it means to be merciless. Someone was tongue-tied. My sister-in-law is coming soon too. She is already on her way. It is necessary to share the reign and do equally. *T, you really don't have any knowledge. How can you use equal treatment like this? But what you said is true. Your sisters-in-law will be here soon. How can you miss this chance? Not bad, not bad. Your sister-in-law is coming too. How can she be absent when your sister-in-law is here? A certain someone immediately turned around as if his butt was on fire. Let's go, son. Dad won't hit you anymore. Let's hurry up and move. If we really have a share, you might not be able to see your dad anymore, honey. The situation is tight, pull out. Far, far, far away on the other side. Enchanting City. Dong Tianling and the others had not been fooling around during this period of time, living up to their reputation as the 4 popinjays of the past. Of course, living up to their reputation was still better than risking their lives to wander around. These 4 fellows were truly frightened. The commotion in Enchanting City had been too great during this period of time. People were dying everywhere, almost at any time. Moreover, the people who died were all experts, and many of them were experts among experts. The 4 of them could not help but feel that all of the martial world's top-notch experts, and skilled cultivators, whether they were known or unknown, had all gathered in Enchanting City during this period of time. The Hall of Crimson Blade, the Merciless Tower, the Concourse of the Underworld, the pinnacle assassins of this world that one might not even meet in 8 to 10 years in the martial world had all appeared here. It was like a gathering, or like it was just for fun. What was more, the 4 Seasons Tower, the mysterious and powerful existence, had begun to fight openly. There was also the School of Kismet State, the superpower that had only existed in the legends of the top aristocratic families, but it had actually made an appearance as well. It was a ruthless character that would not appear in the world for 8 lifetimes. What was going on in Enchanting City? Something big was definitely going to happen. Then, something really big happened. In reality, Great Young Master Yun had stirred up a huge commotion. Initially, the 4 popinjays knew of Great Young Master Yun's intentions and initially had some helpers. However, Great Young Master Yun's actions of killing almost everyone he saw had terrified even the popinjays. Although the people he killed were all bad people, the ruthlessness of his methods was truly shocking. They had thought that Great Young Master Yun's actions were ruthless enough, but it paled in comparison to the actions of the 4 Seasons Tower's 3 venerable lords. The 3 of them had acted swiftly, exterminating entire families at every turn, sparing no one, not even the fowls and dogs. They had almost annihilated the Hall of Crimson Blade and the Merciless Tower's manpower in Enchanting City. Then, the Merciless Tower had launched a targeted attack as well. Once the dictum of death was released, the 4 young masters, who had thought that there was nothing else in this world that could shake them anymore, shuddered once more. Oh my God, all the pinnacle assassins in the world had gathered here. Tianxian continent did not only consist of Yutong, Dongxian, and other empires of martial arts. The entire continent was inhumanely vast. Oh my God, what is he doing now? Therefore, the four noble families closed their doors and sealed themselves off from the outside world. Before they sealed themselves off, they sent a message: behave yourselves, don't wander around, stay in your room and cultivate if you have nothing to do. If you're too bored, find a woman to make a baby. If you want something new, find a man, just don't go out and cause trouble. If there was any, don't bring it to the family, settle it outside. Settle it however you want. This was the requirement that the martial world's top aristocratic families had for their children. There was no limit to it. Actually, even without their family's reminder, the four young masters, who had some understanding of their own abilities, were all well behaved. In such a chaotic era, in such a frenzied situation, whoever was not well behaved would be an idiot. When Yin Yang arrived, the four of them were leaning against each other and playing dice. Finally, the four of them could have some fun together. They did not have to look for women or anything else to relieve their boredom. 6, 6, 6. Leopard. Ancestral leopard. Your father has one. F***ck. This bastard must be on his meds today. 2 leopards in an hour, and now another ancestral leopard. This isn't right, is it? He must be cheating, isn't he? It must be. Nonsense. You're the one who's cheating, your whole family is cheating. Pay up. Pay up. Your father needs to think carefully, think about what's wrong with this. F***ck, you still need to think about losing money? Then why didn't you think about it when you won just now? I won because of luck and luck, but you clearly didn't rely on luck and luck. In short, something is wrong. Something's wrong, your sister. Something's wrong. You dare scold my sister, all the more I can't give you the money, how dare you? Try and go back on your words, see if your father dares to F***ck you to death. F***ck, what did you say? Who do you want to F***ck? Your father wants to F***ck you to death, what can you do about it? Seeing that the quartet was getting angrier and angrier as they talked and were about to fight, Yun Yang took a deep breath and rubbed between his brows before he pushed the door open and walked in. Just as he entered, he saw Dong Tianlong grabbing Chun Wanfeng's shirt, his face flushed with anger. His other hand was clenched into a fist, looking like he was about to fight. Xia Bingchuan and Qiu Yunsan watched the commotion with wide eyes. Beat him up. Beat him up. Dong Tianlong, if you don't dare F***ck him up, you're not a man. I'll look down on you from now on. Chun Wanfeng, if you beg for mercy, you're not a man. Fight him, let's see who can F***ck who, and who can F***ck who. I'll bet 10,000 silver taels that they won't fight. They don't have the guts, they don't have the temperament, they don't have that kind of courage. F***ck, your words are too vicious. Let's bet. The room was a mess. Chun Wanfeng straightened his neck and said, hit me, hit me. I'm telling you, if you F***king dare to hit me, you'll lose even more money. F***ck you're still hanging on to me. Dong Tianlong was about to wedge his fist in. You F***king think you're in the right when you don't want to pay up. Your father is going to fix this problem of yours today. Your father will F***ck you up first, until you pay up, until you admit defeat. Yin Yang shouted with a headache, stop fooling around. Listen to me, I have something to say. The four of them stopped what they were doing and turned their heads in unison, smiling obsequiously at the same time. Boss is here. Boss, please speak your mind. Boss, please instruct us. Boss, this young brother is ready. As long as boss gives the order, this young brother will not hesitate even if you want this young brother to cut off my D***ck on the spot. Dong Tianlong said generously. Yin Yang said impatiently, do it then. I believe everyone would love to see such a rare event. Dong Tianlong's mouth became bigger than a goose's egg. Huh. I said, do it then. I'm waiting to see, Yin Yang said calmly, his eyes indifferent. Ha 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 ha. Looking at Dong Tianlung's expression, the other three men laughed until they were tearing up. Boss. Dong Tianlung looked at Yun Yang pleadingly. Yun Yang gave him a sideways glance. Look at you, you're not being serious every day, spouting nonsense. Can't you be more serious? Dong Tianlung frowned. Yes, yes, yes. This young brother will turn over a new leaf in the future. Chen Wanfeng chuckled. Then you're going to spout nonsense with a straight face in the future? Yin Yang sighed, feeling that there was nothing serious to talk about with these fellows. You guys. If it wasn't for the reason that I need you to do something, I really wouldn't have bothered with you guys. Yin Yang became serious. This is a very important matter. It needs to be treated with caution. There's no room for sloppiness. When the four of them heard this, they became spirited. Boss, please say it. We've been so bored during this period of time. No matter what it is, just leave it to us. We promise that we'll complete it properly and beautifully. Yin Yang rolled his eyes speechlessly. If it were a serious matter, he would not have left it to them. Who knew what the outcome would be? However, the task that he had planned could only be left to the four of them. Others, including Yun Yang himself, might not be able to do it. It was truly making the best use of everything, making the best use of their talents. Other than the super popinjays, no one else could do it. Chapter 576. Then, so, Yun Yang said, when the time comes, I'll let the others work with you. Also, for the next few days, you can wander around and make some movements. You don't have to attract attention, but you have to let people who are interested find out that you have been wandering around for a long time. The follow-up actions are not deliberate, so you must pay attention to this, especially not carelessly. Understood, understood. The four men's eyes glowed as they nodded, feeling that the matter was too interesting. This was a good deed done according to the order, a truly interesting deed. Leaving the four men in the room to discuss the plan and perfect the follow-up, Yun Yang left the room alone and stood in the yard, looking up at the night sky. The stars shone brilliantly in his eyes. He tried his best to empty his heart. He was calculating carefully. Once the plan was initiated, there was no way to stop it. Logically, this might not be the most suitable time. However, if he were to miss this opportunity, it would be too difficult to encounter a time like this where all the storms of the world gathered in Tiantang. It was on this day. In the wee hours of the morning. The sky was just beginning to brighten. Shui Wuyin's message was sent over as if he was running for his life. The Four Seasons Tower had made a move. It did not take much time, but Shui Wuyin had already sent more than a dozen messages. The Four Seasons Tower's actions this time were obviously hasty. Those who came to help had come out one after another. There was no sense of organization or discipline, there was no order to it at all. It was also because of this that the Four Seasons Tower spies, who had always been known to conceal their identities, were exposed in an unprecedented manner. Someone entered Venerable Lord Snow's yard alone. Someone else entered. A person wearing a high-ranking military officer's uniform entered Venerable Lord Snow's yard. He came out after a while and disappeared in the blink of an eye. This person's skills are superb and his ability is extraordinary. Sir Bai, the chief strategist of the residence of Crown Prince, sneaked into the yard and came out after an hour of discussion. He then left in disguise, but we can confirm that it's this person based on his physique. In the wee hours of the morning, someone descended from the sky and entered the yard. There's no definite news of this person's departure. We need to pay more attention. Yin Yang looked at the messages. It was obvious that he had gained a lot, but his expression grew more and more unpleasant. He had previously uncovered so many of the Four Seasons Tower's men hidden in Yutong's government, but he had never thought that there would be so many that he had missed out. Forget about the others, just the high-ranking military general and the Crown Prince's chief strategist. Yin Yang was taken aback. Crown Prince's palace? Chief Strategist? Yin Yang frowned abruptly. As he was concentrating on his thoughts, a thought flashed across his mind. Almost at the same time, an icy glint shot out of his eyes. Yin Yang had long heard of Sir Bai. His background was a mystery, but his skills were masterful. His whereabouts were even more secretive. Even in the residence of Crown Prince, he was elusive. He was the only one who could meet people. It was rare for anyone to contact him. Before the incident at Tianshan Cliff, his eldest brother Supreme Earth had commented on this person. The world says that the 9 Supremes are omnipotent and fearless, but they have overestimated us. There are a few people in Yutong's capital city that we can't see through at all and dare not provoke. The first one is His Majesty's personal eunuch. This person's ability is unparalleled, not something we can match up to. The second one is Sir Bai from the Crown Prince's residence. This person's background is mysterious, his mind is treacherous, and his ability is unpredictable. Try not to provoke him if you can. The third one is Layman Song Wu from the capital city's carefree temple. Among these 3, the last 2 are stronger and harder to deal with, especially Sir Bai. I've asked around many times, but no one knows where he came from. No one even knows what he really looks like. All in all, he just appeared out of nowhere to assist His Highness the Crown Prince. Yun Yang's memory of this sentence was still fresh in his mind. Before the incident at Tianshan Cliff, Sir Bai had gone missing for a period of time. Until Yun Yang returned to Tiantang, Sir Bai had never appeared again after so many things had happened. Yin Yang had almost completely forgotten about this person. Now, however, he had appeared in Snow, Frost, and Sword's courtyard. The meaning behind this was self-evident. The reality made Yun Yang's heart grow colder and colder. All of this meant that the Crown Prince was also related to the incident at Tianshan Cliff? If that was the case, then there was another main culprit in the incident that day, a culprit that had to be targeted and eradicated. Sir Bai. Yin Yang pondered, but he was certain that this person was not to be underestimated. He had to find Snow, Frost, and Sword to understand this person's background and come up with a further plan. He could not afford to take a wrong step now. Then, there was another piece of news. However, this piece of news made Yun Yang feel a little odd. The empire of Dongshuan's dark clouds suddenly appeared and disappeared immediately. All traces are the same as 5 months ago. It's suspected that there's something strange or an unknown expert. Observation is needed. The dark clouds appeared behind the Fortress of Resilience, coming towards Yutong's territory. It grew stronger along the way. It's very strange. Yin Yang frowned. The information that had been sorted out by Shui Wuyin was rarely meaningless. However, these 2 pieces of news seemed to come out of nowhere. Since they could still be sent to him after going through Shui Wuyin's screening, it was obvious that Shui Wuyin thought them to be important. Dark clouds. Yin Yang was deep in thought, recalling the strange incident of Dongshuan's dark clouds looming over the city last year. Could it be related to this? If so, Yin Yang was deep in thought. At this moment, he heard a creak from the door to his right. Ji Lingxi walked out, dressed in martial attire. Her slender figure exuded an indescribable aura of valiance. Where are you going? Yin Yang was taken aback and asked subconsciously. Going out to play. Ji Lingxi snorted. Her original intention of coming here was not to go out and play, but looking at Yun Yang, she could not help but recall his dull, unromantic look last night. She was so angry that she could not help but spout nonsense. Yin Yang rubbed his nose and chuckled awkwardly. Shall we go together? At the same time. The southeast of Tiantang City was shrouded in rising clouds. There was a silhouette fluttering amidst the black clouds, holding a black flag in his hand. When the black flag was waved, dark clouds rose, covering the sun and the sky, spreading everywhere. From afar, one could only see dark clouds surging back and forth. The silhouette hidden within could not be seen at all. I've used this Providence flag to make a big round before I can confirm that this is the direction. The man in black in the dark clouds frowned as he continued to inject mystical chi into the flag, urging the surrounding dark clouds with the flag. His eyes were gleaming as he paid close attention to the slightest changes in the dark clouds. The cultivation base of this man in black was obviously at an unimaginably profound level. From the beginning to the end, he used the method of flying in the sky, not to mention using his profound Xian Qi to activate the Cosmos Luck flag. He traveled thousands of miles without showing any signs of tiredness. Such profound Xian Qi cultivation was really shocking and terrifying, and it was amazing to see. Previously, the direction indicated by the Providence flag pointed straight to Dongxian. However, there has been a drastic change recently. The man in black mumbled to himself, using Dongxuan's declining providence as a guide and connecting it to Tiantang City's flourishing providence. We've finally seen the source of the change. At this delicate juncture, the last person the Providence flag points to is the person who is disrupting the destiny. As long as this person is killed on the spot, Heaven's will return to its previous state due to the inertia of its trajectory. The initial protagonist of Providence will be re-established. Then, the school of Kismet state will be free of worries and worries. Therefore, the person targeted by the Providence flag, whether he's an ordinary citizen or the Emperor of Yutong, must die. The black clouds rolled over from afar, and every time they passed, the black clouds would grow a little stronger. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.